Chapter 247. He wore a fitting black robe, carried a long sword on his back and had a storage bag on his waist. This was the standard attire of a cultivator. It was the first time that he had appeared in a public place outside of Supporting Immortals Island. He was walking on the streets of the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianqiu is here. Someone recognized him and the news spread quickly. Many people came to see what was going on. On both sides of the street, countless people looked at this guy who looked like he was taking a leisurely stroll. Everyone was amazed. They said that he was extremely daring, offended the Daluo sect, and dared to show his face without the protection of Supporting Immortals Island. Yu Qianqiu glanced at both sides of the street, and there were many familiar faces. There were also many people in the Cultivation Alliance who were familiar with him, but they didn't know whether to greet him or not. Especially the people from Supporting Immortals Island, who were disciples of the same sect as him. Everyone had the opportunity to stay in the Cultivation Pavilion after going through many hardships and competitions. Why were they acting like strangers when they met again? Xiong Hui had some friendship with Yu Qianqiu, but he didn't know whether to greet him or not under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and smiled at him. Xiong Hui smiled bitterly and shook his head. Dongwu Su, who was setting up a stall, was shocked when he heard that Yu Qianqiu was here. He threw his stall aside and hurried over. He saw Yu Qianqiu and Yu Qianqiu also saw him. However, Yu Qianqiu looked away as if he didn't know him. The people from the 4 major families were also shocked when they heard that Yu Qianqiu was here. The 4 major families were looking for him everywhere. After confirming that it was him, the communication formations in the 4 shops were activated, and the news of Yu Qianqiu's appearance was sent back. Wow! Brother Yu, you finally showed up. Qiu Weiyuan laughed as he walked over from the other end of the street. As he walked, he pointed at a group of people behind him and said, "Old brother, I'm here to welcome you with my fellows from the Devil Dao." The group of people behind him also laughed happily. As soon as he said that, the expressions of the Righteous Path's people changed, especially the people from Supporting Immortal Island. If the outstanding disciple of the number 1 sect of the Righteous Path joined the Devil Path, then Supporting Immortal Island would really be criticized behind their backs. After meeting up with Qiu Weiyuan and the rest, Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and smiled. "You flatter me, you flatter me." The people of the demonic path were like stars surrounding the moon. They surrounded him in the center, talking to him one after another. He naturally responded as if they were old friends meeting. "Brother Yu," someone shouted from afar. Everyone looked over and saw a few people following behind Yan Zhuixing, walking over quickly. Yu Qianqiu walked out of the crowd and cupped his fists from afar. "Brother Yin, long time no see." The two of them walked over and hugged each other passionately, as if their relationship was very close. The performance here was not over yet. 4 people came out from the side of the street and bowed to Yu Qianqiu together. By clan, Jing clan, Tan clan and Wu clan, under the orders of the clan heads, respectfully invite Mr. Yu to visit the 4 major clans. Saying that, the 4 of them took out their invitations. Yu Qianqiu understood the meaning of the 4 major clans. They knew that he was here and were afraid that something bad would happen to him. So, they purposely came to suppress him in front of everyone. He smiled and received the invitations. He cupped his fists and said, "Send my regards to the 4 clan heads. I will definitely visit them in the future." The 4 of them acknowledged and left. The people in the surroundings couldn't stop clicking their tongues. This Yu Qianqiu might have been expelled from Supporting Immortal Island, but he was still doing very well. The Supporting Immortal Island's disciples in the crowd had an indescribable feeling. Some of them had already left quietly to report what happened here to Quan Deming. Qiu Weiyuan twirled his beard and smiled. This brat's connections were quite wide. He even managed to hook up with the clan heads of the 4 major clans. If he could pull this brat into the 10,000 demons, it would only be beneficial for the 10,000 demons. Not only him but the various demonic sects and Yan Zhuixing also had the same thought. "Brother Yu, you didn't give me face when I invited you for a drink last time. This time don't reject me again." Qiu Weiyuan chuckled. He was referring to the time when Yu Qianqiu hadn't been expelled from Supporting Immortal Island. At that time he was concerned about the feud between the righteous and demonic sects, so he didn't force Yu Qianqiu. Naturally, he didn't have to worry about that this time. "I'll do as you say." Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and said. The people in the surroundings were pondering. They reckoned that it was only a matter of time before Yu Qianqiu joined the demonic sections. "Senior Qiu, that's not right." Yan Zhuixing suddenly interrupted. "How can we let Senior Qiu treat us in our 100 Flowers Palace's territory? Today I'll be the host at 100 Flowers Palace to welcome Brother Yu. Why don't you all come and drink with us?" Once he said that, the demonic sects cheered. Qiu Weiyuan smiled and didn't say anything. If it was someone else he would probably retort. However, Yan Zhuoxing was different. He was the son of his senior brother Yan Bugui. Yu Qianqiu looked at Yan Zhuoxing with a smile. However, he was muttering in his heart, "Damn it! You're so poor that you have to rob others. Why are you still pretending to be generous?" Just as the bustling crowd was rushing towards Hundred Flowers Palace, another group of people walked over. When Yu Qianqiu saw them, he was instantly amused. It was another old acquaintance. However, this old acquaintance wouldn't treat him to a drink. It was Luo Xiaohan, who he had fought at Limu House on Hat Island. At this moment he was leading a group of Daluo sect disciples over with a sinister smile. Everyone knew why Luo Xiaohan was here. The demonic sects always worshipped the strong. Everyone had the mentality of watching a show. They wanted to see how Yu Qianqiu would deal with it. They wanted to see if he lived up to his reputation. Yu Qianqiu suddenly sighed to Yan Zhuoxing, who was beside him. "Brother Yan, it would be great if all the spoiled brats in the cultivation world were as smart as you. However, they are all reckless." Yan Zhuoxing looked at him blankly. He didn't know if Luo Xiaohan was complimenting him or if he already knew something. When enemies met, confrontation was inevitable. Luo Xiaohan smiled sinisterly. "Yu Qianqiu, you haven't forgotten about me, right? I thought you were going to hide for the rest of your life and that I wouldn't have the chance to see you again. I didn't expect you to be so daring. You still dare to show yourself without the support of supporting Immortal Island. You're really courting death." His tone was sinister and filled with killing intent. The humiliation that Yu Qianqiu had brought him could only be washed away with his blood. Otherwise he would be a laughingstock for the rest of his life. "I also didn't expect you to have the guts to show yourself. The saying enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road is right. It's fate that I can run into you under such circumstances." Yu Qianqiu joked. He immediately shouted, "Bastard, hurry up and make way for me. If you continue to be so long-winded, do you believe that I will still dare to beat you up even without the support of supporting Immortal Island?" The demonic sects cooperated and burst into laughter. Some of the onlookers couldn't help but laugh too. Luo Xiaohan's body trembled. His expression twitched and he couldn't speak. He had the urge to attack. The people beside him quickly pulled him back. Yan Zhuoxing frowned. "Brother Luo, this is my 100 Flowers Valley. It's not a place for you to settle your personal grudges. I hope you can abide by the rules here." Chapter 248. Yin, do you think your 100 Flowers Valley's rules can interfere with my Daluo sect?" Luo Xiaohan was so angry that his eyes were red. Qiu Weiyuan's face darkened when he heard the words Yan. Yan Zhuoxing's eyes flashed coldly as he said in a low voice, "What do you want then? Young palace master, don't stoop to his level." A clear voice was heard. Everyone looked over and saw that it was Daluo sect's principal elder in the Cultivation Alliance, Zhu Xianxian. Yan Zhuoxing cupped his hands and greeted, "Elder Zhu." Luo Xiaohan held his breath and greeted, "Martial Uncle Zhu." When Zhu Xianxian and Qiu Weiyuan met, they both snorted and turned their heads away, too lazy to look at each other. This was the customary greeting between the righteous and demonic sections. Zhu Xianxian glanced at Yu Qianqiu before turning back to Luo Xiaohan, frowning. "The 100 Flowers Palace is the owner of this place. Why are you causing trouble here? Don't you know the basic rules? Can't you talk after you leave the 100 Flowers Valley?" Everyone understood what he meant. Yu Qianqiu couldn't hide in the 100 Flowers Valley for the rest of his life. If he wanted revenge, he could do whatever he wanted once he left the 100 Flowers Valley. Luo Xiaohan's anger subsided. He cupped his hands and said, "Martial uncle, you're right." He turned to Yu Qianqiu and snorted, "What's the point of arguing? Leave the 100 Flowers Valley now if you're so capable." I forgot that you, Yu Qianqiu, are used to being a coward. I think you first hid in Kwangtsung. Then you went to Fuxian Island. Are you going to hide in the 100 Flowers Valley again? Or are you going to join some demonic sect?" Yu Qianqiu sneered, "Trying to provoke me to leave the 100 Flowers Valley for revenge? Aren't you afraid of getting beaten up? Are you getting bolder because you have the support of your seniors? Do you really think that sneak attacks are a skill?" Luo Xiaohan sneered. Do I need to use my seniors to deal with you? Come out and try if you have the guts. He did not believe that he, a nascent soul stage cultivator, could not defeat a core formation stage cultivator. He had always believed that the reason why he was beaten up on Hat Island was because the opponent had successfully ambushed him. Those from the Grand Immortal sect shared the same sentiments. Everyone was very quiet. They didn't know if Yu Qianqiu would be provoked out of the 100 Flowers Valley. What he didn't know was that Yu Qianqiu was worried about Zhu Xianxian and the other masters in the Crossing Calamity stage. Yu Qianqiu had been waiting for him to say this. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, "It's not that I don't want to go out, but I'm afraid that I'll kill you when I go out. If the Daluo sect keeps pestering me, I'll be annoyed to death." "Kill me? What a joke." Luo Xiaohan said disdainfully, "If you're afraid, just say it. There's no need to find some high-sounding excuse. This is a personal grudge between us. If you really have the ability to kill me, I can guarantee that the Daluo sect will not trouble you in the future. Today I'll say this. If you have the guts, follow me out of the 100 Flowers Valley." Yu Qianqiu looked around and said, "Everyone here heard it? This Luo Xiaohan is not going to let me go. If I don't accept his challenge, he will think that I, Yu Qianqiu, am afraid of him. Since that's the case, please be my witnesses. Today I will fight him outside the 100 Flowers Valley." "Good." Qiu Weiyuan clapped his hands and shouted, "Today is a personal grudge between the two of you. If anyone else dares to interfere, I, Qiu Weiyuan, will be the first to deal with him." He had never seen Yu Qianqiu's capabilities. Today was a rare opportunity. Moreover, Luo Xiaohan himself had said so. It would be a waste not to do him a favor. "Yes, if anyone dares to interfere, we won't let him go." The demonic cultivators joined in. They wanted to see what the famous Yu Qianqiu was capable of. Yan Zhuixing's eyes were filled with suspicion. Why did Yu Qianqiu look like he had dug a pit for Luo Xiaohan to jump into? Zhu Xianxian also frowned. "If that's the case, then let's go. I've been longing for this day for a long time." Luo Xiaohan smiled ferociously. "What's the rush? You don't have to rush to reincarnate. I have some words of advice for you." Yu Qianqiu stared at him and shook his head. He said with infinite melancholy, "I, Yu Qianqiu, have never tasted defeat since my debut. So, using my all-seeing mystic art to fight you is really making a mountain out of a molehill. How about this? I don't want to take advantage of you, so I'll leave you with these words. Since you said that you don't need the help of the elders, then I'll allow the seniors and juniors of the same generation to help you. I don't have any objections." When the crowd heard him say things like, "never tasted defeat," and "all-seeing mystic art," they immediately booed. They all thought to themselves, so this Yu Qianqiu is a braggart. When they heard the latter part of his words, they immediately felt that this guy was crazy. It was already good enough for a core formation cultivator to defeat a nascent soul cultivator, but he actually wanted them to find helpers. Wasn't this courting death? Qiu Weiyuan and Yan Zhuixing looked at each other. This guy must have a screw loose. It took them so much effort to nail down his words and prevent the others from Daluo sect from interfering, but now it was ruined by his own words. Zhu Xianxian was also stunned. He thought he had heard wrong. What they didn't know was that Yu Qianqiu, who was in the middle of the situation, was thinking even more. He didn't care about the outcome of this battle. He knew that regardless of whether he won or lost, Daluo sect would let him off in the open, but they wouldn't let him off in the dark. After all, he didn't have a backer like supporting Immortal Island anymore. Since that was the case, he would rely on his own strength. Those who were kind would be bullied by others. Usually, the more famous a person was, the less people would dare to provoke them, and the less people would dare to bully them. How can a Luo Xiaohan ignite my infamy? Yu Qianqiu ignored the various expressions of the crowd and glanced at the Daluo sect disciples. "Arrogant." Luo Xiaohan sneered. "Cut the crap. Come out if you have the guts." With that, he took the lead and walked out of the city gate of the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and followed. The entire 100 Flowers Valley was in an uproar. Yu Qianqiu was really going to fight to the death with the son of the Daluo sect master. In an instant, the crowd surged forward and rushed to the city gate, looking for a good spot to watch the battle. Before long, all the streets of the 100 Flowers Valley became empty. Many of the stalls in the market had been taken away, and those that were confiscated had left their stalls. No one was in the mood to do business now. When almost all the people had left the 100 Flowers Valley, Yan Zhuixing and the people from the Devil sect followed the leisurely Yu Qianqiu to the city gate. After exiting the 100 Flowers Valley, they saw so many people in the originally secluded forest. It was a little abrupt. Luo Xiaohan was waiting in a relatively flat area. The crowd was centered around him. The forest was full of grass and trees, so it was not practical to walk there. The sword on Yu Qianzhou's back popped out and carried him. After landing in front of Luo Xiaohan, he sheathed his sword and looked around. The shopkeepers of the 4 major families were also here. Dong Wusu and his wife also came with a child. Even Fuxian Island's Quan Deming came with a group of people. Just at this moment, Yan Zixia also arrived with an elder with an extraordinary bearing. Yan Zixia still acted as though she did not know him. She did not know who that elder was, but when he landed beside Yan Zhuixing and Qiu Weiyuan, both of them were extremely respectful towards him. Could it be that this person was Yan Bugui? With a clang, Luo Xiaohan rose into the sky with his mid-nascent soul cultivation. He stared down below and sneered, his expression full of contempt. Yu Qianzhou's gaze was fixed on Hong Qi, who was beside Dong Wusu. He then raised his head and looked at the sneering guy in the sky. The sword was unsheathed and carried him to the same height. Luo Xiaohan was amused when he saw him riding on the sword empty-handed. He thought, "You're courting death. How dare you come up empty-handed?" Only the people from Fuxian Island knew that it wasn't the case. Yu Qianzhou could not control a flying sword. As expected, when a pile of flying swords flew out of Yu Qianzhou's storage pouch and filled the sky with an imposing aura, they formed an umbrella behind him. Luo Xiaohan's expression froze and he couldn't smile anymore. Most of the people around were shocked. It was the first time they saw someone controlling so many flying swords at the same time. No wonder he was so arrogant. They didn't know how powerful they were. Zhu Xianxian frowned and began to secretly transmit his voice to the Daluo sect disciples beside him. Yu Qianzhou said with an expressionless face, "Shall we start now?" It was the first time Luo Xiaohan saw someone who could control so many flying swords. To be honest, he was shocked. After calming himself down, he sneered, "It's just a facade." As he spoke, the flying sword in his hand suddenly shot toward his opponent. Whether it's a facade or not, you'll know once you try. Yu Qianzhou didn't mind his sudden attack at all. He quietly stood on his sword and flicked his finger. 10 flying swords flashed out of the sword umbrella behind him and quickly went to meet the flying swords that were shooting at him. Chapter 249. Clang Clang. With a flash of cold light, the 10 flying swords Yu Qianzhou had released immediately entangled the opponent's flying sword in the air, producing a series of ear-piercing sounds. However, the difference in cultivation between the two was too great. Luo Xiaohan formed a seal with his fingers, and the flying sword spun in the air, bouncing off the entangled flying sword. With a whoosh, it once again shot toward the opponent. Go combine. With a flick of his fingers, another 10 flying swords flew out from the sword umbrella on Yu Qianzhou's back. He brought his palms together again, and the 10 flying swords merged into one, fiercely colliding with the oncoming sword. Clang. The oncoming sword's momentum was halted. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yu Qianzhou once again joined his palms together and shouted, "Combine!" The 10 flying swords that had been bounced off earlier merged back into one, quickly striking the middle section of the opponent's flying sword. Bang! However, the opponent's sword only sank a little, not flying off. "You're overestimating yourself." Luo Xiaohan sneered. His fingers formed a seal, and the flying sword bounced into the air, whistling through the air as it slashed at one of the combined swords. Bang! Yu Qianzhou's mind shook, and the combined sword was immediately scattered. Before he could even stabilize his mind, the opponent's flying sword struck another combined sword. With a loud bang, Yu Qianzhou's body swayed and he almost fell off his sword. Who was stronger and who was weaker could be seen in just a few moves. Some from the Daluo sect began to cheer, while many from the demonic path shook their heads and sighed. Next to Dong Wusu and his wife, Hong Qi clenched his small fists. Despite his young age, he knew that his master had suffered a loss. This won't do. The difference in cultivation between the two sides is too great. Yu Qianzhou was secretly startled, but he forced himself to calm down and called back the 20 scattered flying swords. He spread his arms and waved them, shouting, "Go!" More than 90 flying swords whistled through the air in a cone shape. Luo Xiaohan snorted coldly as he quickly summoned his sword back into his hand. His eyes were fixed on the flying swords that were flying towards him as he shouted, "Daluo sky-shattering style." Gripping the hilt of the flying sword with both hands, he immediately transformed it into an illusory giant sword. Raising it high in the air, he fiercely slashed it down. With a loud bang, the cone formed by the 98 flying swords was immediately scattered, one after another falling from the sky to the ground. Yu Qianzhou staggered on the flying sword. He pressed his hand against his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. The 98 flying swords, which were connected to his mind, sent back a powerful tremor at the same time, injuring him on the spot. Luo Xiaohan looked at the 90-odd flying swords on the ground and exclaimed softly, "They're all superior-grade flying swords." According to his own estimation, with such a huge difference in their cultivation bases, his attack should have shattered at least a dozen of his opponent's flying swords, even if not all of them had been shattered. Who knew that none of them had been shattered? So they were all superior-grade flying swords. Once bitten, twice shy. Yu Qianqiu finally understood that with his cultivation base, it was impossible for him to fight his opponent head-on. With a pinch of his fingers, the flying swords on the ground immediately flew back to him and circled around him a few times. His 10 fingers pinched together like a lotus, and the 98 flying swords scattered in different trajectories and quickly swarmed towards him. "You really won't shed a tear until you see your own coffin." Luo Xiaohan snorted coldly as he let go of the flying sword in his hand and let it hover in the air in front of his chest. He quickly made a complicated pinch of his fingers and pointed at the tail of the sword. He hurriedly shouted, "Daluo sky-shattering style." The body of the sword trembled and rotated rapidly, transforming into countless sword shadows. He pushed them out with one palm. The number of sword shadows increased, and in the blink of an eye, they formed a sword shield in front of him. It immediately entangled all of the flying swords that Yu Qianqiu had released. After a series of ear-piercing crisp sounds, Yu Qianqiu was forced to give up controlling the 98 flying swords. If he continued to resist, he would definitely be injured again. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu had given up resisting, Luo Xiaohan laughed heartily. With another pinch of his fingers, the spinning range of the sword shadows shrank. He bounced Yu Qianqiu's flying swords back one by one and kept them into his storage bag. The onlookers felt that it was a pity. Even Qiu Wuyuan and the others who supported Yu Qianqiu from the devil path could not help but sigh. At this moment, Yan Zixia finally revealed a trace of worry in her eyes as she witnessed the situation. The people from supporting Immortal Island, on the other hand, had indescribable expressions on their faces. Although Yu Qianqiu had been expelled from supporting Immortal Island, he was still an outstanding disciple of supporting Immortal Island. His loss had brought shame to supporting Immortal Island. The 4 shopkeepers of the shops from the 4 major clans had received orders before they came. If Yu Qianqiu was defeated and in danger, they were to rescue him at all costs. At this moment, the 4 of them were already ready to make a move. Yan Zhuixing sized up the 2 people who were fighting and felt that something was wrong. It seemed like it shouldn't have ended like this. Because Yu Qianqiu was too calm, it seemed like he did not care about this defeat at all. Did he think that Luo Xiaohan would let him go just like that? Luo Xiaohan stared at the flying sword under Yu Qianqiu's feet. He was not in a hurry to make a move. Instead he teased, "Yu Qianqiu, thank you for the high-grade magic tool you gave me. If you still have it, I might let you go if I'm happy." A burst of laughter came from the Daluo sect's side. Yu Qianqiu stood on the flying sword with his hands behind his back. He squinted his eyes and stared at Luo Xiaohan. He said arrogantly, "You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I, Yu Qianqiu, have never been defeated since my debut. How can I be defeated by a bastard like you? That was just a warm-up. Now I'll show you how powerful my Shen Qi is. I hope you won't regret it." Today he was not as low-key as he usually was. Instead he talked a lot of big words. Only he knew why. Hearing this, Luo Xiaohan laughed again. He said, "All right, bring it on. I want to see how powerful your Shen Qi is." He stopped abruptly before he could finish his sentence. He was dumbfounded. A demonic red light lit up in the sky, and a sea of fire suddenly appeared in the sky. In the middle of it, there was a person looking at him indifferently, as if he was looking at an ant. Who else could it be other than Yu Qianqiu? What was going on? The spectators were shocked. Even those who were standing far away could feel the scorching heat. The flowers and trees around the sea of fire were already emitting wisps of green smoke. The sea of fire had already started burning and was slowly spreading to the surroundings. The shock brought to everyone was indescribable. Qiu Wuyuan swallowed hard and murmured, "What kind of spell is this? Why haven't I heard of it before? Could this be the Shen Qi that Yu Qianqiu mentioned? Senior brother, have you heard of it?" The person he asked was precisely the Flower Palace's Yanbu Gui. The latter recovered from his shock and exhaled before he said, "Amazing, I'm able to feel such a high temperature while standing here. How could Yu Qianqiu, who's within the flames, endure it?" Yan Zhuixing nodded to himself. That's right. He really had something to rely on. No wonder he was so arrogant. Among the crowd, little Hongqi's eyes shone brightly, and his 2 little hands couldn't help but grab onto his maternal grandparents' clothes. Dongwu Su and his wife looked at each other, and they couldn't conceal the shock in their eyes. In fact, it was not only the two of them. The others were the same. After De Luo Sect's Zhu Xianxian regained his senses, he winked at the disciples around him, warning them to get ready. Seeing that the disciples were a little timid and did not move for a long time, he could not help but feel annoyed. He took a step forward and wanted to take action himself. Unexpectedly, he heard Qiu Weiyuan's laughter. Zhu Xianxian, let's set the rules before the duel. If any of Luo Xiaohan's masters make a move, don't blame me, Qiu Weiyuan, for being impolite. Under the crowd's gaze, Qiu Weiyuan laughed heartily. He was going to do Luo Xiaohan a favor today. Yu Qianqiu glanced over and quickly retracted the flames around him, compressing them to an arm's length away from him. He stared at the dumbfounded Luo Xiaohan and said coldly, "Didn't you want to see how powerful my Shen Qi is? Why aren't you making a move?" Chapter 250. On the other side, Yu Qianqiu was clad in flames, standing in the air like a god of fire. Luo Xiaohan's heart palpitated. He was now in a dilemma. If he fled now, he would lose all face for the De Luo sect. He was the legitimate son of the sect master. Others could flee, but he could not. However, he was too timid to do so. People were always afraid of the unknown. "If you're not going to make a move, then I will," Yu Qianqiu said again. Luo Xiaohan turned to look at Zhu Xianxian, pleading for help. Then he gritted his teeth and said, "It's just a smoke screen. Don't use it to scare people." As he spoke, the sword in his hand shot out, looking like he was taking the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Yu Qianqiu was expressionless. He raised his hand and pointed two fingers. A thin red line of fire shot out to meet the flying sword. Now that he had his own understanding of fire control, he realized that the more compressed a flame was, the more powerful it would be. Poof! The red line of fire collided with the flying sword. There was no loud sound as it was split apart by the sword's edge. However, with a buzz, the broken line of fire turned into a ball of fire that immediately engulfed the flying sword and burned it. The flying sword advanced a few meters when it collided with the line of fire. Then, the enchanting flames melted the sword into a ball of liquid and fell to the ground. Luo Xiaohan's face paled. The spectators around him gasped. What a powerful flame! It almost melted the flying sword in an instant. Umph! Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. After withdrawing the line of fire, he suddenly rode his sword towards Luo Xiaohan. He did not want to waste any more time with his opponent. In the eyes of the spectators, it was as if a ball of fire was rushing towards Luo Xiaohan. Without a sword in hand, Luo Xiaohan immediately fumbled for the flying sword he had just obtained. He suddenly realized that there was still a strand of Yu Qianqiu's divine sense in the sword. If he wanted to control it, he would have to spend some time to erase it. However, he did not have the time to do so in his current situation. His instinctive reaction was to turn tail and run. But with his nascent soul cultivation, how fast could he go without flying on his sword? When he turned around to take a look, the burning man Yu Qianqiu was already closing in on him. He was scared out of his wits. As he desperately flew forward, he shouted, "Uncle Master, save me." His intestines were about to turn green with regret, but he couldn't regret what he had done. It should be known that most of the cultivators in the cultivation world relied on flying swords and other magic artifacts and magic treasures to fight. Without these things, not many people could do anything in a fight. After all, it was not realistic to fight a flying sword with bare hands. Since Zhu Xianxian was being watched by Qiu Weiyuan, it was not convenient for him to make a move. He glared at the 6 disciples beside him and harumphed angrily, which was more or less a threat. The 6 of them were also original infant-stage disciples. They were supposed to accompany Luo Xiaohan out to play. Although they said they were out to play, they were actually here to protect him. At this moment, they did not dare to hesitate any longer. The consequences were not something they could bear. After exchanging glances, the 6 of them quickly flew away on their swords. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the 6 of them and smiled ferociously. Instantly his killing intent surged. He had purposely chased after Luo Xiaohan, waiting for the others to make a move. Now was the time to kill, and also the beginning of his fight with the Deluo sect to the death. The speed of the flying sword suddenly increased by a few notches. His 5 fingers formed a claw that was covered with a thin layer of dazzling red flames. It directly pierced through Luo Xiaohan's back like a knife cutting through tofu. There was not the slightest bit of strain in his movements. How could the flaming claws, which had been suppressed to the extreme by Yu Qianqiu, be blocked by a mere human body? Naturally, it was effortless. Luo Xiaohan did not even have the chance to scream. He felt his body stop moving as if he was hanging on something. Looking down, he saw a flaming claw protruding from his chest, holding a heart, as if it was placed in front of him for him to see. Then, his vision blurred and he lost consciousness. In the midst of Zhu Xianxian's angry roar, Luo Xiaohan turned into ashes, which were blown away by the wind. A storage pouch was caught by Yu Qianqiu, who threw it into his own. Countless people's faces changed. What a powerful fire spell. Everyone was shocked. This Yu Qianqiu really dared to kill. Wasn't he making an enemy out of the Deluo sect? Did he really think that he could fight against the Deluo sect alone? He was simply courting death. However, the demonic cultivators, starting from Qiu Weiyuan, applauded and cheered. It was impossible for Yu Qianqiu to stay in the righteous sections. A lone cultivator was also weak, so if he wanted to live in peace, he would have to join the demonic sections. How could the demonic cultivators not be happy when they thought about how they would have such a person? Yu Qianqiu, who could control the intensity of the fire with ease and suppress the temperature of the fire, pretended to hold up Luo Xiaohan's bloody heart in front of Zhu Xianxian. Under Zhu Xianxian's furious gaze, the heart was annihilated with the wind. At that moment, 6 flying swords were already flying towards them. Yu Qianqiu faced the sky and let out a long roar. He spread his arms and his entire body became like the mouth of a spring. Endless raging flames rushed out from his body, surging in all directions like the sea. The flames were monstrous and engulfed the 6 flying swords in an instant. The 6 cultivators immediately felt that they had lost contact with their flying swords. There was no time to think. Running for their lives was more important. The sea of fire was already rushing towards them. However, the speed of the 6 people who had lost their flying swords could not keep up with the speed of the sea of fire. In the blink of an eye, the sea of fire engulfed the 6 people who were scared out of their wits, leaving behind 6 incomparably painful screams that spread in the wilderness. The surrounding people were immediately startled by the surging flames. Could it be that this madman wanted to kill everyone at the same time? Just as everyone was about to escape, the sea of fire quickly retracted. Even the flames on the surrounding vegetation were retracted. When the monstrous flames were retracted back into Yu Qianqiu's body, not a single spark could be seen on the ground. Following that, the flames were retracted. It was a miraculous sight. As for the 6 cultivators who had been swallowed by the sea of fire, there was no longer any trace of them. It was obvious that they had been reduced to ashes. With the crisis averted, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. However, they could not imagine that such a huge and unparalleled flame could be hidden in a person's body. It was simply unimaginable. They were all shocked by the scene just now. A core formation cultivator killed 7 nascent soul cultivators just like that? Brother Yu, you're amazing. Qiu Weiyuan gave a thumbs up to Yu Qianqiu, who was still standing in a ball of fire in the air. The people from Devil Dao cheered wildly. However, the people from the Righteous Dao felt it was a pity. They all looked towards Fuxian Island. Why did they expel such a powerful disciple from the sect? Actually, how could Quan Deming feel good in his heart? But what could he say? He could only sigh in his heart. He was originally an outstanding disciple that the sect was prepared to nurture. If it wasn't for Ang Kuangsung. Actually, this disciple didn't do anything wrong to Fuxian Island. If they knew that Ang Kuangsung's sect would be exterminated, the 4 shopkeepers of the shops of the 4 major clans didn't understand why the 4 clan heads valued Yu Qianqiu so much. But now it seemed that the 4 clan heads already knew about it. The 4 of them couldn't help but look at each other. Yan Zixia looked at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated expression. However, her father and brother's eyes flashed with a strange light as if they saw a treasure. Yu Qianqiu stared coldly at Zhu Xianxian and said emotionlessly, "Elder Zhu, is this duel fair? If you think it's unfair, why don't you teach me a few moves? I'm willing to learn from you." His tone was calm, but it carried a domineering aura of contempt. He was clearly challenging Zhu Xianxian. Everyone was shocked. A core formation stage cultivator wanted to challenge an elder of the Luo sect, who was in the early stage of tribulation passing. Wasn't he too arrogant? But then they thought about it. Who knew what other secrets this fire spell had? Who knew if there was a more powerful killer move? Otherwise Yu Qianqiu wouldn't be so arrogant. Brother Yu, you're so brave. I can feast my eyes on you again. Ah. Qiu Weiyuan gave a thumbs up and laughed. He turned his head and shouted, "Zhu Xianxian, don't let me down." The people of Diabolism immediately followed suit. Everyone's eyes were focused on Zhu Xianxian. Hearing this, Zhu Xianxian's expression changed. After a long time he said in a low voice, "Do you think I'm a member of your Diabolism? I won't bully the weak." After saying this, he turned around and left, floating toward the entrance of the 100 Flowers Valley. The people of Diabolism immediately booed. Some people cursed him for being hypocritical and shameless. Hearing the curses behind him, Zhu Xianxian looked calm on the surface, but his heart was bleeding. The Luo sect had lost a lot of face today, but he didn't have the slightest confidence that he could defeat Yu Qianqiu. Anyone who saw the monstrous flames just now would be terrified. Gambling with his life was not worth it. The Luo sect is only SOSO. Yu Qianqiu's words drifted over, almost causing him to vomit blood. He resisted the urge to turn back and quickly entered the 100 Flowers Valley. In fact, Zhu Xianxian didn't know that Yu Qianqiu secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Zhu Xianxian had really left. That raging flame technique had consumed most of the fire element stored in his body. Without the support of the fire element, it was impossible for Yu Qianqiu to use the powerful fire art. If Zhu Xianxian turned back now, Yu Qianqiu could only escape. Unfortunately, the monstrous flames just now had already shocked the former. Yu Qianqiu looked around, and the raging flames outside his body were all retracted back into his body. His gaze landed on the child standing between Donghua Su and his wife, and he directly flew over on his sword. After landing, he sheathed his sword. He stared at Hong Qi and said with a faint smile, "Do you still recognize me?" Chapter 251. Lil Hongqi's lips twitched. He was obviously a little excited. His master's technique just now was simply too spectacular. His eyes sparkled, and he looked back at his grandfather as if he wanted to say something. In the past, his grandfather had warned him more than once not to let others know that he had a master. Now that his master had come to him, he didn't know how to answer. When Hong Qi first became his disciple, because Yu Qianqiu was still a disciple of Fuxian Island, Donghua Su was quite satisfied. Later on, Yu Qianqiu became the public enemy of the Cultivation Alliance, which made Donghua Su's heart jump. He was afraid that he would be implicated, so he often warned his grandson not to tell others about his master. Now that Yu Qianqiu had made a strong appearance and publicly found them in front of everyone, it was obvious that he wanted to expose this hidden disciple. He had seen everything that happened at the scene. Yu Qianqiu's connections and strength were enough to protect his grandson. If he could learn that powerful fire technique, it would be beneficial for him for life. How could Donghua Su have any objections? He immediately smiled and nodded at his grandson. Lil Hongqi's face lit up. He knelt on the ground with a plop, and kowtowed. Disciple Hongqi greets Master. I thought you were angry at Master for not looking for you for a long time. Yu Qianqiu helped him up and smiled faintly. He rubbed Lil Hongqi's head and sized him up. He frowned and said, "Only level 5 Qi refinement, a little slow. You have to work hard. When you reach the foundation building stage, Master will pass the Starflame Fire Technique to you." Starflame Fire Technique? Lil Hongqi widened his eyes and asked, "Is that the technique Master used just now?" Yu Qianqiu opened his palm and a ball of flame ignited in his palm. It instantly condensed into a bright red firebird that fluttered in his palm. Of course, he had already restrained the temperature, or else little Hongqi would not be able to withstand it. Yu Qianqiu smiled. "Yes, this is the Starflame Fire Technique that Master created. If you want to cultivate it, you have to work hard to improve your cultivation." Hongqi looked at the cheerful firebird and his eyes lit up. He nodded. "Master, I will definitely work hard to improve my cultivation." Hearing this, everyone was shocked. They didn't know if what Yu Qianqiu said was true or false. Such a heaven-defying technique was actually created by him. That was an incredible talent. The people of supporting Immortal Island, especially Quan Deming, already knew that Yu Qianqiu was talented. When he was on supporting Immortal Island, he had created his own alchemy technique. Later on, he even modified the Guiyuan sword technique to cultivate. They didn't expect that he could also create such a powerful fire technique. In other words, it was a great loss for supporting Immortal Island to expel Ong Kwangtsung from the sect. Although everyone was shocked, they still envied the young Hongqi the most. With a master like this, his future was bound to be boundless. Dongwu Su and his wife looked at each other, and they were pleasantly surprised. They were surprised because they didn't know if Yu Qianqiu would be able to avoid the revenge of the exalted sect, and they were delighted because so long as Yu Qianqiu was able to deal with the exalted sect, then their grandson's future would be bright. This was truly a bet that was difficult to choose. This kind of mentality was probably a common problem of parents. "Ah, brother Yu, since when did you accept a disciple?" Qiu Wuyuan laughed heartily. Behind him were the siblings Yan Bugue and Yan Zixia, as well as a group of ambitious and ruthless people. Yu Qianqiu retracted the firebird in his palm. He glanced at the people of supporting Immortal Island and said with a smile, "I accepted him previously. I wanted to bring him back to supporting Immortal Island, but who knew that even I would be expelled from supporting Immortal Island?" Coincidentally, the fire art I comprehended was at a critical juncture. I didn't have time to care about him, so I let him cultivate on his own at such a young age. These words almost made Quan Deming and the others vomit blood. It turned out that this guy was already comprehending this overbearing fire art when he was expelled from the sect. If he wasn't expelled from the sect, wouldn't supporting Immortal Island have another peerless art? The people of supporting Immortal Island were depressed. The people from other sects also looked at them as if they were looking at fools. Qiu Wuyuan also glanced at the people of supporting Immortal Island when he heard this. He rejoiced inwardly. Fortunately, that group of idiots had expelled Yu Qianqiu from the sect. Otherwise, if supporting Immortal Island had such a tyrannical technique, wouldn't the demonic path be suppressed? However, Qiu Wuyuan was in a good mood today. The Luo sect had suffered a loss, supporting Immortal Island had lost face, and even the entire righteous path had lost face. He couldn't help but laugh. "Brother Yu, you don't need to lower yourself to those people's level. If you are interested, my 10,000 demons will welcome you with open doors. As long as you are willing to join my 10,000 demons, I guarantee that you won't have to suffer from those cowards." Hearing this, the people of the evil path's eyes brightened. They all sent out warm invitations. "My blood demon palace warmly welcomes you. The corpse sect awaits your arrival." The invitations of the evil path sects immediately changed the faces of the righteous path sections. I appreciate everyone's good intentions. However, after experiencing 2 sects, I have suffered a lot of cowardice. From now on, I don't want to join any sects of the righteous path or the evil path. I just want to be independent. Yu Qianqiu clasped his hands at everyone and asked Hongqi, "Hongqi, are you willing to accompany Master to travel around the world?" "Yes." Hongqi nodded. He didn't know what was good or bad. He just agreed based on his intuition. Yu Qianqiu smiled satisfactorily. In fact, there was no need to travel around the world with him. It was just to deal with people's rejection. He then said to Dongwu Su and his wife, "Today I will take Hongqi with me. Are you two willing?" The two looked at each other. Although they were reluctant, they still bowed together and said, "Thank you, sir." Seeing that he didn't want to join the evil path, the people of the evil path were a little disappointed. However, they didn't force him. The righteous path also felt a little comfortable. "Brother Yu." Seeing that they were almost done talking, Yan Zhuisheng interrupted and pointed to the old man beside him and introduced, "This is my father." Yu Qianqiu sized up the old man in front of him with a serious expression. Sure enough, he had the air of a formidable character. He immediately bowed and said, "I've long heard of Senior Yan's great name. It is my honor to be able to meet you today." "Ah, Yu Qianqiu, you are friends with my junior brother and Xing. There is no need to be so polite." Yan Bugui waved his hand and said with a smile, "My 100-Flower Palace doesn't belong to the righteous path or the evil path. We have always been neutral. Since you are not interested in the righteous path or the evil path, why don't you come to my 100-Flower Palace? Although my 100-Flower Palace isn't a big sect, it can more or less avoid some trouble. Yu Qianqiu, are you interested?" Hearing that, Yan Zisha's eyes flickered indeterminately. On the other hand, Dongwu Su and his wife were looking forward to it. If Yu Qianqiu joined the 100-Flower Palace, then they wouldn't have to be separated from their grandson. The other sects were stunned. Could it be that the 100-Flower Palace will take advantage of him in the end? But that's good. It's a good thing as long as this person doesn't fall into the hands of the evil path. Yu Qianqiu's heart skipped a beat. He rubbed his nose and didn't answer for a long time. His face was full of smiles as his gaze swept back and forth between the Yan father and son. When his gaze fell into their eyes, he instantly felt as if all his secrets were seen through. Yan Bugui coughed lightly and broke the awkwardness. "There is no hurry to answer. Why don't you stay in the 100 Flowers Valley and think about it slowly?" Yu Qianqiu chuckled lightly and shook his head. "The 100-Flower Palace is neither righteous nor evil, so it's a good place to go. Unfortunately, Senior Yan and Brother Yan are both people who do great things. I've said that I only want to be independent, so I truly don't dare to get involved in your matters." The others didn't think much of it and thought that it was just Yu Qianqiu's excuse. However, Quan Deming from Fuxian'an suddenly stared at the father and son pair. Yan Bugui and Yan Zhuisheng's expressions changed, and the latter's gaze burned with anticipation. "Brother Yu, what do you mean? Why don't I understand? Brother Yan, do you really want me to make it clear in front of all the sects? That isn't good, right?" Yu Qianqiu replied with a question, and then he shook his head and sighed. "What if I make it difficult for your 100-Flower Palace? Wouldn't it hurt the friendship between us?" His words had already put the 100-Flower Palace in a difficult position. If he didn't say it, all the sects would definitely think that the 100-Flower Palace was hiding something, and they couldn't help but associate it with the 100-Flower Palace. Say it. If he really knew something, then it was something that couldn't be exposed. "Yu Qianqiu, just say what you want to say. Don't make everyone suspicious." Yan Bugui frowned. "But you better not speak nonsense. My 100-Flower Palace isn't that easy to mess with." As expected, the older the wiser. His words not only smoothed things over but also contained a half-threat. Everyone was puzzled and only Quan Deming's face was gloomy. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and he snorted. "Senior Yan, I can distinguish the severity of some things and I know what to say and what not to say. But I hate it when people threaten me the most." There was a hint of coldness in his words. Yu Qianqiu turned his gaze to Quan Deming, and he shook his head and sighed. "Elder Quan, I've always thought that Fuxian Island was really the strongest sect in the cultivation world. But some time ago I accidentally learned some things, and then I realized that there's always someone better than you. Some hidden forces are the real number one in the world. So, looks like the cultivation world is going to be chaotic soon. Someone wants to unify the righteous and demonic sects, and become the first person in history. An Kuangsung is a good example. I don't want to get involved in these things, so it's better for me to stay away from them so that I won't be affected." Chapter 252. It was easy to imagine the commotion caused by his words. As long as one wasn't an idiot, they would be able to understand what he meant. According to what he said, there was a hidden force in the cultivation world that was even more powerful than supporting Xian Island. This force wanted to unify the entire cultivation world. An Kuangsung was killed by it, and this force was secretly controlled by Baihua Palace. Everyone had different expressions. They were both doubtful and in disbelief. Actually, if these words were said during normal times, the father and son of the Yen clan wouldn't have taken it to heart. They would just push the blame onto others and push the blame onto others. Who could do anything to them if there was no evidence? Unfortunately, the supporting Immortal Island had suddenly barged in and fought with them. Others might not know what Yu Qianqiu was talking about, but the supporting Immortal Island had suffered a loss, so how could they not know? The worst thing was that even if they were stronger than the supporting Immortal Island, the key to determining their strength was the number of experts at the final stage of the crossing tribulation stage. They only had 4 experts, while the supporting immortal island had at least 20 experts. These 20 experts were the key to establishing the supporting immortal island as the #1 expert in the world. It didn't matter if Yu Qianqiu knew about it or not. But one thing was for sure. This guy pretended to be innocent, but he was actually looking for trouble on purpose. Otherwise, he wouldn't have exaggerated the matter. Yan Bugui was furious. Yu Qianqiu, you are obviously slandering Baihua Palace. What are your intentions? Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. I don't have any intentions, and I didn't mention your Baihua Palace by name. I don't think Baihua Palace's lord knows about this. He later asked Shui Qing Kong about some details. He guessed that it was done secretly by the Yin father and son, and Baihua Fairy didn't know about it. Baihua Palace controlled a group of powerful forces, but Baihua Palace's lord didn't know about it. This was a bit strange. 10,000 demons. Qiu Weiyuan's eyelids twitched. He looked at Yan Bugui suspiciously. Could this be a trap set up by the sect that even I don't know about? He couldn't help but think of the oath he made when Ong Kwangsung's clan was destroyed. If it was really related to 10,000 demons, wouldn't he die a horrible death? Supporting Immortal Islands, Quan Deming's eyes flickered. He also suspected that this was the Palace of Myriad Demons plot. If what Yu Qianqiu said was true, how could Baihua Fairy, as the Palace Lord of Baihua Palace, not know about it? Wasn't this clearly showing that the one surnamed Yen was guarding against supporting Immortal Island, or rather, targeting supporting Immortal Island? Yen Zixia bit her lips. First of all, because of her relationship with Yu Qianqiu, she more or less believed what he said. Second of all, she had been in Baihua Palace for so many years. She had noticed that her father and brother had done something behind her mother's back, so it was possible. In short, the more Yu Qianqiu didn't explain it clearly, the more suspicious everyone would be. Yan Zhuixing roared almost crazily, Yu Qianqiu, are you crazy? When did Baihua Palace offend you? Why are you trying to frame Baihua Palace? He knew what the consequences would be if this was confirmed. Not to mention the attacks from all the sects. If his mother found out that he and his father had done such a thing behind her back, the family would probably fall apart. Yu Qianqiu secretly sneered. Damn it. Everyone is hiding in the dark, relying on their own abilities to make a living. You could have pretended to be anyone, but you had to pretend to be my hero. If I don't teach you a lesson, who else should I teach? Now you know the pain of being framed? Not to mention, I'm not just framing you. Brother Yen, who are you saying is crazy? Do you really want me to shed all pretense of cordiality and spill everything? Yu Qianqiu's tone was cold. He wanted to seize the opportunity to ignite the fire, wishing for the whole world to be in chaos. Actually, he didn't realize that ever since he gained some strength, he was much more daring in doing things. Yan Bugui was indeed a wily old fox. He had already figured out what was going on. This Yu Qianqiu really did know a lot of things, and he was deliberately trying to find fault with him. If he picked up the topic, he would not let it go. Right now, the best thing to do was not to argue with him. The more he argued, the more he would be at a disadvantage. If there was anything, they could talk about it later. It was not the time to settle things in front of all the sections. He immediately blocked his son, who was about to go crazy, and said coldly, there will be a day when the right and wrong will be clear. Why are you arguing so much now? Let's go. Stop. Yu Qianqiu shouted. He wouldn't let the Yen father and son go so easily. Since he had already dragged them off the boat, the enmity between them was already set in stone. How could he not use the pole of the boat to stab them a few more times? It would be best if he could drown the enemy. What else do you want? Yan Bugui turned around and asked. He was suppressing the anger in his chest and came out to watch the show. He didn't expect that his clothes would be stripped off, and now he was the focus of the crowd. How could he say anything? If there weren't so many people present, he would have killed Yu Qianqiu long ago. Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly. There are some things I don't want to say, but since someone called me crazy, then I have to make it clear. As for whether I'm crazy or not, let everyone judge after I'm done. Everyone stared at Yu Qianqiu, obviously waiting for him to finish. Yan Bugui's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what else he would say. He shouted angrily, who wants to listen to your nonsense? Get lost. My 100 Flowers Valley doesn't welcome you. Wait. Quan Deming walked over, a smile on his face as he said, Brother Yin, there's no need to get angry. We're all bored anyway, so there's no harm in listening. I don't believe his words anyway. I just want to hear what he has to say. That's right, there's no harm in listening. Many people followed. If Yan Bugui continued to hide, it would be obvious that he was guilty. He snorted coldly and stopped talking. His mind was racing, thinking of a way to deal with it. Yu Qianqiu didn't care so much. He walked leisurely and said slowly, "Actually, after I was expelled from Fuxian Island, I didn't go anywhere else. I just cultivated in a mountain not far away from the 100 Flowers Valley. One day when I was cultivating in a hidden place in the valley, a cave suddenly appeared on the opposite mountain wall. I saw hundreds of masked men in black coming out from it. There was also a young palace master with them. Because I knew that young palace master, although I was a little suspicious of their mysterious actions, I didn't do anything. After all, I wasn't in a good situation at that time." Everyone's eyes immediately focused on Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing was so angry that he trembled. However, Yu Qianqiu didn't mention his name. If he jumped out now, it would be no different from giving himself away. Quan Deming's face was gloomy. He asked, "What happened after that?" Yu Qianqiu paused and continued, "But the next day, I heard the news that An Kuang-tsung was attacked by hundreds of men in black. I was suspicious at that time, so I hid in the valley to observe. I even wanted to run into the cave to find out what was going on. Who knew that I was blocked by some strange formation? I really couldn't go in, so I hid and continued to observe. Sure enough, a few days later, hundreds of people came out from the cave. However, they were all dressed in white, and the number was less than the men in black. After they came out of the cave, they secretly hurried to the east. Although their cultivation was very high, they obviously didn't dare to be too ostentatious. So I followed them. None of you would believe what I saw later." Everyone was listening attentively. He stopped again. As a result, even Qiu Weiyuan couldn't help but ask, "Brother Yu, what did you see? There's no harm in telling us." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "These people actually went out of the sea. I secretly followed them all the way to an island. There were cultivators everywhere on the island, and I estimated that there were more than 10,000 of them. What surprised me the most was that even though I was in the middle stage of the core formation realm, I didn't see anyone with a cultivation level lower than mine. Moreover, I occasionally saw people who could use teleportation. It was clear that they had reached the late stage of the transcending tribulation. Fortunately, my body was different from ordinary people, so it was hard to be discovered. Otherwise, with their cultivation, I would have been discovered long ago, and I wouldn't have been able to return. At that time, I hid in a rock and happened to hear two people talking. It turned out that there really were more than 10,000 people on the island. The earliest people had been here for nearly 150 years. They were all kidnapped by someone using the natal primordial spirit stripping technique. Among them, there were individual cultivators and disciples from various sects in the cultivation world. I was secretly surprised, but who knew that I would hear a shocking secret later, which scared me even more. Chapter 253. Wasn't the natal primordial spirit stripping technique lost a long time ago? Qiu Weiyuan's face darkened. This technique was a nightmare for cultivators, regardless of whether they were righteous or evil. Once they were controlled, they wouldn't be able to resist at all and would be at the mercy of others. Everyone's face changed. They didn't expect such a thing to appear. The father and son of the Yin family didn't look good either. They didn't know if it was because of Yu Qianqiu's nonsense or because his secret was exposed. Quan Deming glanced at him. He was more concerned about what would happen next. He asked in a deep voice, "Yu Qianqiu, what's the secret?" Yu Qianqiu looked in a certain direction and smiled bitterly with lingering fear. "To be honest, I'm afraid that after I say it, someone will kill me today. I'm not afraid of ordinary people, but the hidden strength of that person is too strong. If he sends two experts at the final stage of passing tribulation, I'm afraid I won't be able to keep my life." "Go ahead and say it. I'll make it clear today. I don't care about other places, but here, anyone who wants your life will have to go through my supporting immortal island first. Unless everyone in my supporting immortal island dies, no one will be able to touch a single hair of yours. Don't worry and speak boldly." After Quan Deming finished speaking, a few disciples of supporting Xian Island immediately guarded around Yu Qianqiu. They looked around like tigers watching their prey. I'm relieved with Elder Quan's words. Yu Qianqiu sighed and continued. Those two said that they attacked the spirit stone mines of Daluo sect and An Kuang-tsung to test their coordination. After killing An Kuang-tsung, the master felt that it was enough and made a plan to unify the cultivation world. He wanted to create some trouble between supporting Xian Island and the 10,000 demons. It would be best if the two sects fought each other. As long as the two sects were in chaos, the righteous and evil sects would be in chaos. When the strength of the cultivation world was almost exhausted, we could seize the opportunity and use the natal primordial spirit stripping technique to firmly control the cultivation world. After listening to them, I jumped in fright. I didn't dare to stay there any longer. After the two people who were talking left, I sneaked back into the room. But I have a bad habit. I can't control my curiosity. Later, I couldn't help but sneak into the valley and witness a great battle. At this point, Quan Deming had already guessed what he was going to say. His face was gloomy and he didn't say anything. Chiu Weiyun couldn't help but ask, "Don't stop, brother Yu. Who fought who? Tell me." Yu Qianqiu nodded with a wry smile. "One day I was hiding there when I saw Elder Dongfang of supporting Xian Island leading 50 crossing tribulation elders to the valley. I thought it was strange. What were the people of supporting Xian Island doing here? Who knew that they would spend some effort to break the formation protecting the cave? After they entered, I heard the sounds of a fierce battle. I didn't know what was going on inside, but if you want to know, you should ask Elder Dongfang. When I was outside, I saw another scene. There was another entrance to the cave. While they were fighting inside, another entrance covered by a formation appeared on the other side. The young palace lord was quickly escorted away by two people. It seems like the people from Fuxian Island suffered some losses in the cave. More than 50 elders went in, but only a dozen came out. It was Elder Dongfang who held a golden spear and fought desperately to protect the others from escaping. Elder Dongfang then retreated while fighting and flew towards 100 Flower Valley. This happened a few days ago. I don't know what happened after that. Dongfang Chang'eo? Golden Origin Spear? Supporting Xian Island lost dozens of crossing tribulation elders? Damn. Why haven't I heard of this before? Chiu Weiyun scratched his head and turned to ask, "Quan Deming, brother, you doesn't look like a liar. Don't tell me you don't know what happened in supporting Xian Island. Is this true or not?" Quan Deming looked at the father and son of the Yen family and sneered. "Yes, it's true." Yu Qianqiu didn't say a word. "My supporting Xian Island was wondering who sent so many experts to kill more than 30 crossing tribulation stage elders of my supporting Xian Island. It turns out that someone has been plotting for more than 100 years to unify the cultivation world. Chiu Weiyun, the eyes of your myriad demons palace are growing on your buttocks. You almost got tricked by your own people without even realizing it." Previously he was worried that the 10,000 demons were behind this. But after hearing what Yu Qianqiu said, it turned out that someone didn't want to let the 10,000 demons go. Chiu Weiyun was stunned by his words. Unless Yu Qianqiu was talking nonsense, but part of the process had been confirmed by Quan Deming, so it shouldn't be fake. He looked at his senior brother and didn't know what to say. The surrounding people were in an uproar and disgust. They didn't expect someone to set up such a big conspiracy. But supporting Xian Island and the 10,000 demons were behind the 100 Flowers Palace. It wasn't up to the other sects to decide how to deal with it. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, looked much more relaxed now that he had said what was on his mind. The Yen family's father and son looked gloomy. Only the two of them knew that Yu Qianqiu was obviously tricking them. Putting aside the other flaws, how could they not know whether they were the ones who robbed Daluo sect and Ong Kwangsung's Spirit Stone mine? If this wasn't framing them, then what was? But this guy actually knew a lot of things, especially about the battle between Dongfang Chang'eo and the people in the valley. Supporting Xian Island was the first to believe it. Yen Bugui looked around and said in a deep voice, "Why are you all looking at us? Even if what Yu Qianqiu said is true, did he say that we were the ones who did it?" Everyone was stunned. They didn't expect Yen Bugui to deny it even now. Chiu Weiyun didn't expect his senior brother to be so shameless. Quan Deming sneered, "Yu Qianqiu, since you've said it like this, why don't you just tell us who the mastermind is?" "Yu Qianqiu, don't go overboard with your nonsense." Yen Bugui's tone and expression were clearly threatening the witness. "Just say what you want. No one will dare to do anything to you," Quan Deming said in disdain. Yu Qianqiu's gaze paused on Yen Zixia. After a long time he shook his head and sighed, "I've forgotten who the mastermind is." Everyone was stunned. Yen Bugui laughed and said, "I already said this has nothing to do with us, but you don't believe me. Let's go." The members of the Flower Palace flashed through the sky with swagger. Only Yen Zixia glanced deeply at Yu Qianqiu before she left. She probably thought that Yu Qianqiu had intentionally let them off for her sake. Everyone didn't know what Yu Qianqiu was up to. It wouldn't make sense if he said he was afraid of Yen Bugui. As long as he testified, they wouldn't let him go. Letting him go would be the most dangerous thing. Yu Qianqiu sneered to himself. "What good does it do me if you catch him? I've forced him into a dead end and left him a way out. As long as he's not an idiot, he'll run away the moment he returns to White Flower Valley. By then, the tens of thousands of people in his hands will be of great use. It should be enough to stir up chaos in the cultivation world." "Chaos is good. I like it. Why didn't you say it?" Quan Deming frowned. Are you afraid that Fuxian Island can't protect you? He had already prepared an excuse for this. He shook his head and sneered, "Protect me? Even if that's the case, Fuxian Island has already abandoned me once when I was in danger and needed protection the most. How can I trust them?" Qiu Weiyun looked him up and down and asked doubtfully, "Are you that afraid of death? From what I know, you've always been bold." "Times have changed. I thought I had a good master who could protect me. Now I have to rely on myself. How can I not be careful? I still want to live for 2 more years." Yu Qianqiu mocked himself. He took out a jade archive and handed it to Quan Deming, saying, "This is the route I memorized when I went to that island the last time. If you want to go there, you must be careful. That island is truly filled with experts. It's not a lie. If Senior Qiu is interested, you can make a copy and take a look." "Alright, this is all I can do." "Wait." Quan Deming had a question that he wanted to clarify. This matter was very important to Fuxian Island, so he stopped him and asked, "You just said that Baihua Palace Lord probably doesn't know about this. What makes you so sure that Baihua Fairy doesn't know about this?" Not to mention him, even Qiu Weiyun wanted to clarify this matter. Chapter 254. To supporting Xian Island, the Guan family was the strongest existence that ruled the entire island. Although Baihua Fairy had been expelled from supporting Xian Island, she was still Guan Dinghai's daughter. Regarding this, the decision-makers of supporting Xian Island couldn't help but consider it carefully. Had already thought but now that the so-called heroes could not allow supporting Immortal Island and 10,000 demons to find common interest, it created a lot of pressure for the mainstays of both the righteous and demonic side with Guan Dinghai's daughter. If they did not fall into chaos, the cultivation world from other factions in supporting Xian Island, it would be difficult and they had to give an explanation to the disciples of supporting Xian Island. That's why Baihua Fairy can't get involved in this. This was why supporting Xian Island had to keep the news under wraps. She has to be even after more than 30 people were killed. It was hard to make a decision without a thorough investigation. When I was hiding in the valley, I overheard the conversation that if this matter was related to his daughter, he would personally deal with her. Frowned. But as someone who was raised by the Guan family, he had to consider the Guan family's anything in front of the other party. Otherwise, why would they help you? Now that the other party had left, they directly reported the other party's name without a reminder. It immediately attracted Quan Deming's attention. How could they know that Yu Qianqiu wanted to let them go? What did they talk about? The sect master and the others would be able to do whatever they wanted. Yu would expose Bai was concerned about this issue because he was thinking from the perspective of the 10,000 demons. Spirit stones. If this matter really had nothing to do with asked him why they couldn't get more, and it was all planned by the Yen father and son, enough spirit then the 10,000 demons would be at a disadvantage. Was very unhappy at the time, who didn't know that Bai Hua Palace was able to stand well in the cultivation world without falling because of the secret attention of the number one sect of the righteous and master doesn't know about the father and son duo. Palace was they couldn't get planning to control the entire cultivation world of the Wuxia using a large amount of spirit. This was a matter that caused Bai Hua Palace's master. Everyone was waiting to see how to deal with it. Might even be discovered by supporting a mortal fairy who was supported because of this. He auctioned off the 5 divine craftsmen's treasures and arranged for people to rob 10,000 demons was secretly causing spirit stone mines. Who wouldn't suspect that the 10,000 demons were behind this? Around at everyone. Even he himself. From their conversation, we can tell that they're in dire need of spirit stones. The internal situation of the 10,000 demons was similar to that of supporting Xian Island. It was also a situation where Yen family's looking at everyone's expression, even the decision makers couldn't do anything. But if Bai Hua Fairy was also involved, it would be much easier. They didn't come from the number one sects of the righteous and demon path. They came from the Yen father and son duo. For the benefit of both sects, what couldn't be discussed? Was there anything in the cultivation world that couldn't be solved by two families? This matter is related to everyone's benefits. Is hoping explaining it would only cause also one of the masterminds, so now isn't the time to argue. Everyone, I'll be leaving first. Yu Qianqiu clasped his fist at everyone, then gestured for Dongwu Su and his wife to bring Hong Qi back first. After such a thing happened, no one asked him to stay for a drink anymore. At the entrance of Hundred Flowers Valley, Yu Qianqiu noticed that the shopkeepers of the 4 major clans had followed him. Seeing that there was no one around, he immediately waved at the 4 of them, and they quickly came over to greet him. Yu Qianqiu said to Wu Clan's shopkeeper, "Help me send a message to your clan master. Ask him to wait for me at Wu Clan. I'll go look for him in a few days and fulfill my promise to him." The 4 of them looked at each other and didn't understand what was going on. Wu Clan's shopkeeper clasped his fist with a little doubt and said, "Mr. Yu?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted, "You don't have to ask too much, just tell your clan master my words, he will naturally know what I mean." Finishing his words, he glanced at the returning sects and flashed into Hundred Flowers Valley. In Dongwu Su's courtyard, a family of 3 was waiting for him. After Yu Qianqiu came in, he looked around for a while and said, "Mr. Dongwu, it's not safe for you to stay here anymore, it's better for you to leave with me." The couple looked at each other, then Dongwu Su clasped his fist and said, "We appreciate Mr.'s good intentions, but if we follow Mr., we might be a burden to Mr. Mr., it's better for you to leave with Hong Qi first. The world is so big, we can just find a place to hide, and it won't be easy for others to find us. Don't think too much. It's not what you think. We're not going to escape." Yu Qianqiu glanced at little Hong Qi, who was looking at his grandparents reluctantly. He immediately raised his hand and pointed at the house, saying in an unquestionable tone, "Now pack up everything that you can take with you. I'll send you to a safe place." After saying that, he saw that the couple was still a little conflicted, so he shouted in a stern tone, "Don't hesitate anymore. Pack up immediately." Regardless of whether they were willing or not, seeing that Yu Qianqiu was a little angry, the couple immediately followed his instructions for the sake of their grandson. After the couple was ready, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and sent the family of 3 into Utopia. Then he walked through all the rooms inside and out. He took away all the tables, chairs, paintings, tea sets, pots and pans, and even the bedding and quilts. When he returned to Utopia, Dongwu Su and his family were dumbfounded as they looked at the pile of things on the ground. Guan Yu, who had received the summons, quickly brought a few people over. Yu Qianqiu pointed at Hong Qi and said, "His name is Hong Qi and he's my disciple. Bring him to the military camp. Put in some effort and strictly supervise his cultivation. Don't show any mercy. After his cultivation breaks through to the foundation establishment stage, I'll bring him to Ethereal Palace to personally teach him." After saying that, he pointed at Dongwu and his wife and said, "These are Hong Qi's maternal grandparents. Help them move the things on the ground away and build a house for them in the south that's about to be reclaimed. In the future, Utopia's self-sufficient farming will be handed over to Mr. Dongwu. Got it?" Guan Yu sized up the 3 of them and immediately ordered his subordinates to carry out the orders. Dongwu Su and his wife looked around and felt like they were in a dream. They were so shocked that they couldn't say a word. However, Yu Qianqiu disappeared from where he was. Chapter 255. Inside Bai Hua Palace's main hall, there was no one on the left or right, only a dignified and beautiful woman was sitting in the middle. There was a row of empty chairs beside her. If Yu Qianqiu knew that this beautiful woman was that old man Yan Bugui's wife, he wouldn't be surprised. The cultivation world was the same as the mortal world. All women cherished their looks, and in the cultivation world only women would be willing to spend so much of their cultivation to slow down the aging of their looks. What men care about is strength. Their logic is that as long as they are stronger than others, what's there to be afraid of not having a woman? That's why it's common for Dao companions to be old men with young wives. After Bai Hua Fairy received her subordinate's report, she dismissed her subordinates and sat alone on her throne, recalling everything that happened in the past. For that man, she didn't hesitate to fall out with her father, was expelled from the sect, worked hard to get to where she is today, and even gave birth to a son and a daughter for him. She thought it was worth it, but that man actually hid it from her for over 100 years. No one could understand the sorrow she was feeling right now. Yan Zixia slowly walked into the main hall. Her gaze fell on her mother's hands that were tightly gripping the chair. She called out, "Mother?" Bai Hua Fairy looked up, squeezing out a loving smile. It's good that she has a daughter to accompany her. Her mouth opened and closed a few times before she spoke, trying to be as calm as possible. "Did your father and brother both leave?" Yan Zixia bit her lips and nodded dejectedly. Then she heard her mother let out a long sigh. At this time, Yan Bugui and Yan Zixia were leading a group of people on their flying tools, quickly heading east. Their destination was naturally the island where they were hiding their strength. For them, that was the safest place. Yan Zixia's expression was twisted as she gritted her teeth. Yu Qianqiu, I won't forgive you." Yan Bugui looked at his son with a serious expression, not sure if the force he worked so hard to build up could withstand the storm that's about to come. He sighed, "Exposed too early, all my efforts wasted, huh? Your mother must hate me to death right now." In Fuxian Island, Feng Xiangtian was worried about the death of more than 30 elders. The elders from the other factions were already pressuring him. The pressure was huge. When he received Quan Deming's report, he was stunned. Yu Qianqiu had actually created another fire spell? With his core formation stage cultivation, he killed 7 Daoyuo sect's nascent soul stage disciples in a row in the 100 Flowers Valley and challenged the Daoyuo sect's tribulation stage elder. The elder fled in fear. Yu Qianqiu's name shook the cultivation world with a single battle? Feng Xiangtian stood there expressionlessly for a long time, and he sighed in his heart. Looks like I didn't make a mistake back then, what a pity. It was useless to lament the loss of such a talent. After all, he was the one who had personally expelled him from the sect. After a moment of silence, his spirits rose. It was good that this matter had nothing to do with senior sister. Feng Xiangtian looked at the injured Dongfang Chang'eo and waved to the people in front of him, "Follow me to Heaven Heart Pavilion." He immediately threw the matter of Yu Qianqiu to the back of his mind. To him in Fuxian Island there were more important things to do. Without the intervention of Yen Clan, 100 Flowers Palace was Fuxian Island's 100 Flowers Palace. There was also the hero who dared to attack Fuxian Island. A series of matters needed to be handled quickly. In Wu Clan's ancestral hall, after receiving the news from the shop in the 100 Flowers Valley, Wu Sihai laughed and said to the 3 clan masters, "This kid finally appeared. We don't have to look around anymore. So, I really don't know what to say about this kid. It seems like wherever he goes he will create earth-shattering incidents. I've never seen him in peace. Is he talking about fulfilling his promise about going to Demon Domain?" Bai Clan's clan master, Bai Shouji, asked. "That's right." Wu Sihai nodded with a smile. "This is what he promised. Since he is coming, we don't have to rush to the 100 Flowers Valley." Tan Clan's clan master, Tan Ruchang, said. The leader of the Jing clan, Jing Feihong, nodded and said, "He said he'll be here in a few days. We shouldn't have to wait too long. Let's get ready here and wait for him." The 4 of them nodded. After Yu Qianqiu arrived at the State Pillar General's residence, he asked Shi Xiaotian about the recent situation. He learned that Fuxian Island sent another nascent soul state preceptor to protect the emperor, and the emperor didn't do anything to the general's residence. It was obvious that the development of the situation wasn't deviating from his original guess. Just think about it, Fuxian Island was already busy with their own matters. How could they have the time to care about the secular world, at least in the near future? It seemed like his operation in the cultivation world had many effects. First, not only did he divert Fuxian Island's attention from the secular world, but he also ensured that his plan in the secular world was carried out. Second, he diverted the cultivation world's attention from him. Now, everyone's attention was probably on the father and son from Yen Clan and the forces behind them. The matter of wanting to kill him had stopped. Third, he suppressed and attacked the fake heroes. Fourth, his plan to disrupt the cultivation world and exhaust the strength of the cultivation world could be carried out steadily. This would reduce the pressure on the rise of his heroes to the minimum. Fifth, after the battle in the 100 Flowers Valley, he made the Star Flame Fire technique famous. Ordinary sects probably wouldn't dare to provoke him. Even if there was, it would be the Daluo sect. However, even if they didn't come looking for him, he would still go looking for them. After understanding the general situation, Yu Qianqiu carefully checked the defense of the general's residence. Although he felt that no one would come looking for trouble, since Shi Wenguang had entrusted his family to him, he had to be careful. If there was an accident, it would disappoint Shi Wenguang. On the way he met Bao Wanshi and Sidu Hui. The two women were now very respectful to him. The incident that night had completely shocked them. This Mr. Yu was not an ordinary person. After finding the heroes, who were secretly guarding the general's residence, Yu Qianqiu greatly encouraged the 10 of them. He asked them to continue to work hard and stick to their posts. He also gave them abnormally generous rewards. After that, he still dressed up as a servant and leisurely went to Wanhualu. Once he arrived at the courtyard of Wanhualu, he walked around the lush greenery and saw the Enchantress of 100 Charms leaning against the window of the attic and looking at him with a smile. Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a headache. After he went up to the attic, he still bowed respectfully and said, "Master's wife." The Enchantress of 100 Charms' waist that was as soft as a water snake came close to him, forcing him to take a few steps back. Then she laid her soft arms on his shoulder and breathed into his ear. She smiled charmingly and said, "Yu Qianqiu, you're really good at scheming. Tell me honestly, how many secrets do you have that you haven't told your master's wife?" Yu Qianqiu coughed a few times and took the opportunity to turn to the opposite side of the table. After the two of them were separated by the table, he stopped coughing and said with a bitter smile, "Master's wife, you're too serious. I do have a few secrets but not as many as you think." Although he believed in the Enchantress of 100 Charms' feelings for Hao Sanxi and that she did not have any evil intentions towards him, he would not go so far as to reveal all of his secrets to her. The saying that the human heart was unpredictable was the truth. There were also different levels of people he believed in. At least in his heart, the Enchantress of 100 Charms was far from the level of Baisujian. There were very few women that a man could entrust everything to. Hearing this, the Enchantress of 100 Charms' eyes seemed to be free of charge as she threw them over one after another. Wrapped in red muslin, her plump buttocks were sitting on the table. A fair and slender thigh slid out of the muslin and was lifted up to place on the table. It was very dazzling, especially the scenery under her skirt, which was faintly discernible. Yu Qianqiu felt that his nose was going to bleed, so he quickly turned his head to the side. The Enchantress of 100 Charms pulled her entire body onto the table and posed seductively. She giggled and said, "Not many secrets? Let's not talk about the hero from before. Now there's this Star Flame Fire technique that could actually force Zhu Xianxian, who was in the tribulation stage, to run away. Yu Qianqiu, you really surprise me endlessly." As she said this, she swung out a fair and fleshy leg and pointed at Yu Qianqiu's chest with her vermilion toe. She said, "You dare to say that the new talent assembly that was held by the supporting Immortal Island wasn't disrupted by others because of you? Also, how did the supporting Immortal Island know the location of the valley have nothing to do with you?" Yu Qianqiu coughed a few more times and went around to the other side, avoiding the toe that was pointing at his chest. He forcefully explained, "That was purely an accident. Who are you trying to fool?" The Enchantress of 100 Charms rolled her eyes and placed her hands on the table. She puffed out her plump chest and snorted, "What a good scheme. I originally wanted to see who was the real and fake hero, and who was more powerful. Great, you caused trouble for the supporting Immortal Island and caused them to lose more than 30 tribulation stage elders for nothing. Then, you ran to the 100 Flowers Valley and caused a ruckus. You're pushing the supporting Immortal Island to be the vanguard. Fortunately, I knew some things beforehand. Otherwise, how would I know that a little fellow like you actually had so many crooked thoughts? I'm depressed. How Wu Wei is such an honest person. How did he teach a little fox like you?" Yu Qianqiu chuckled at the side. He didn't bother to explain and tacitly agreed to it. He thought to himself, how can it be so simple? I'm aiming for the whole cultivation world. Master's wife, you can slowly experience it. Little fox, you're feeling guilty, right? The Enchantress of 100 Charms raised her hand and swiped her finger across her red lips. She asked lazily, "You don't come to me for no reason. Little fox, tell me the truth. What did you come to me for?" Chapter 256. Mistress, look at what you're saying. I'm here to see you. Yu Qianqiu said with a silly smile. Who are you trying to fool? I think you can't wait to avoid me, yet you're here to see me. You're not telling the truth, are you? The temptress was too lazy to say anything more. She pulled the red muslin off her legs, revealing her white, fleshy thighs. Since you're so filial, I can't refuse you. Come, don't go anywhere today. Massage my legs. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. His expression suddenly became serious. Now that you've reminded me, I really do have something I need your help with. Too late. The temptress raised her hand and pointed at her thighs lazily. Massage my legs first, then we'll talk about other things. Yu Qianqiu immediately chuckled. Mistress, I'm clumsy and uncomfortable. Next time I'll find you a skilled master to serve you. Cut the crap. If I don't massage today, don't come looking for me next time. The temptress snorted. Damn it. You're trying to take advantage of me. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. After hesitating for a while, he gritted his teeth and slowly moved closer. He opened his claws and touched the temptress's smooth and elastic thighs. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Yu Qianqiu muttered in his heart. He looked straight ahead and his fingers, which were as hard as chicken claws, began to pinch her white and tender thighs. It was torture. As soon as he started, the temptress's body trembled. How was this a massage? It was more like tickling. She quickly covered her mouth with her hands, but she couldn't hold back her laughter. In the end, she couldn't stand the tickling anymore. She pulled her legs back and said weakly, Forget it, I don't want you to massage anymore. If you continue to pinch me, Shenyang's life will definitely end up in your hands. Say it. Find me if you need anything. Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to cause any more trouble. This mistress was a seductress among women. She was extremely seductive and seductive. If he continued to cause trouble, he would definitely lose control. He knew his character very well. He needed to borrow himself down. Beauty's information. He warmed up his stiff hands and said situation of the cultivation world. Please help me collect the news of the world of cultivators. He couldn't let others exterminate them too easily. The 100 charm demon couldn't let others stop. Smile. He had to know his limits and act according to the situation at another crucial moment. He had to see when he needed to intervene. He had to keep an eye on the movements of the cultivation world to keep fighting. The matter of the Daluo sect had to be resolved sooner or later. Startled, and the revenge of his master could not be delayed indefinitely. Legs and retracted. I need to find an opportunity. On her face. After all, the Daluo sect strength is extraordinary, so I can't come to me at any time to get the latest news. But if I do, I'll wipe out the exalted sect. Then I'll leave it to you, Mistress. That's what I swore. I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. Said solemnly. Yu Qianqiu wasn't lying, but he had an even more important goal. He really didn't dare to stay any longer. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself and do something shameful. Wait. The allure beauty stopped him. She frowned and said, You said your master's grave just now. Can you tell me where he is buried? Yu Qianqiu paused for a moment. He shook his head and said to her apologetically, Mistress, that place involves some people who don't want to show their faces. It's not convenient for me to tell you right now. But I can promise you that after my master's death is avenged, I'll personally bring you there. I understand. A trace of disappointment flashed across the allure beauty's face. Yu Qianqiu turned around and quickly left. The allure beauty moved her body down from the table. Her eyes inadvertently glanced at the finger marks on her thigh. Thinking about the situation just now, a rare flush appeared on her face. Her breathing quickened. She looked out of the window and muttered, When love is a thing of the past. At the western border there were many military camps. Because the flames of war at the border had been extinguished, it became lively again. There were many large and small markets around the border. Various countries began to trade with each other. The civilians and merchants who wandered here finally enjoyed the value of peace. Shirin Tian was dressed in a military uniform. He led a group of people to the market to buy things that would be used for construction. The Pillar of State General ordered the construction of barracks to replace the flexible tents from before. It seemed that he intended to stay here for a long time. Shi Tian was followed by 2 soldiers who had not spoken a word since the beginning. These 2 soldiers were none other than the 10 members of the underworld that Yu Qianqiu had sent to protect the Pillar of the State General. Shi Wenguang was worried about his son's safety. Thus he sent 2 people to follow him. Suddenly there was a commotion in the market. A servant dressed in black clothes and a black hat blocked the path of Shirin Tian and the others. A group of soldiers wanted to chase him away, but they were blocked by Shirin Tian. Who else could this servant be other than Yu Qianqiu? Shirin Tian looked at the 2 people beside him. Both of them were calm. It was obvious that they already knew that Yu Qianqiu was coming. He quickly walked over and was about to greet him when he saw Yu Qianqiu bowing first. "Second young master, Madam has asked me to deliver a letter to master." Shirin Tian was taken aback. He immediately understood that Yu Qianqiu did not want to attract attention. He smiled and said, "Come, follow me to see master." Under the watchful eyes of the surrounding merchants, Yu Qianqiu followed Shirin Tian towards the barracks. Passing through the gate guarded by the soldiers, they entered the barracks. Yu Qianqiu got rid of his servants and looked around. Suddenly he saw a crowd moving in the direction of the training ground. He could not help but ask, "Shirin Tian, what's going on over there?" Shirin Tian looked over and sighed. "Yesterday, a general named Zhang Ping violated the rules of the army. He led his men to pillage the state of Wei and almost caused a war between the two countries." He then looked at the blazing sun in the sky and sighed. "For the sake of military discipline, the general who violated the rules will be executed at noon." Ah, he was a talented general. What a pity. Hearing his regretful tone, Yu Qianqiu asked as they walked, "Who is this Zhang Ping? Why does young general think so highly of him?" Shirin Tian walked beside him and said in a heavy voice, "Zhang Ping is a local. When he was young, his house was plundered by the Wei army. He was the only one who did not die but was on the verge of death. When my father was passing by with his army, he saved him and has been by his side ever since. He started fighting with the army at the age of 14 and has been through more than 10 years. In every battle, he was the vanguard of his men and was wounded countless times. It is a miracle that he is still alive today. Perhaps it is because of his tragic childhood, Zhang Ping has become a bloodthirsty and ruthless person. His men have never taken any captives in battle and have killed them all. Ah, my father did not have the heart to do so, but this is a matter of great importance. Now that the borders cannot be in chaos, my father can only use him as a warning to the others and to uphold military discipline." Yu Qianqiu stopped walking. He was just asking casually and could not be bothered to care about a dead man. He did not expect to hear such a formidable person. His interest was piqued and he waved his hand. "Let's go, I want to see what this fierce general looks like." Chapter 257. Shirin Tian was taken aback, but he quickly led the way. When they arrived at the edge of the training ground, the surrounding soldiers quickly made way for them when they saw the young general. Yu Qianqiu silently stood beside Shirin Tian and looked at the simple wooden platform. It would have been fine if he didn't look, but once he did, he immediately gasped in shock. A bare-chested man was tied up with his hands behind his back, and an executioner was standing beside him, ready to execute him. The man was tall and muscular, and even though he was tied up, one could still feel the murderous aura emanating from his body. His eyes were filled with killing intent, and it was obvious that he was someone who had been through a lot of killing. What shocked Yu Qianqiu was not these, but the fact that this man's upper body was bare. Apart from his face, there was not a single patch of unscathed skin on his upper body. There were all kinds of mottled scars of various shapes and sizes, obviously left behind by the baptism of various weapons. On his chest and arms, there were also a few fresh wounds that had yet to dry. Damn it. This guy really crawled out from a pile of corpses. He probably used his scars as tattoos. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. It was a pity that such a good general was killed just like that, but this was not his business. His gaze swept across Zhang Peng's body a few times, and just as he was about to leave, suddenly someone behind him said softly, "Leader, this man has innate spiritual roots." Innate spiritual roots? Yu Qianqiu was startled. He didn't need to turn around to know that it was his subordinate who was talking to him. Others wouldn't call him leader. Yu Qianqiu immediately focused his gaze on the man, and after a closer look he was shocked once again. It really was innate spiritual roots. Anyone who entered the cultivation world must have spiritual roots, and people like Yu Qianqiu were only exceptions. Spiritual roots were also divided into different grades, and the so-called innate spiritual roots were the ones with the highest aptitude for cultivation. It was rumored that one could achieve twice the results with half the effort. It seemed that there hadn't been such a person in the cultivation world for a long time, and he didn't expect to meet one. Yu Qianqiu immediately turned his head and whispered into Shirin Tian's ear, "Spare him, I have great use for him." Shirin Tian actually heard the words of the person behind him, and although he didn't understand what it meant, since Yu Qianqiu had spoken, his father would definitely give him face, so there was hope for Zhang Ping to live. Thus, he said in a low voice, "This order can only be revoked with my father's order. There is still some time before noon. Why don't Mr. inform my father?" Let's go. Of when they arrived at the main didn't say anything. The other
else.
soldiers stayed outside.
Shirin Tian quickly
After
led
the
him
two
towards
of
the
them
main
entered,
tent.
Yu Qianzhou smiled at the figure in the middle who was holding a map and said, "General, how have you been?" Shi Wenguang turned around and his face lit up. He took a few steps forward and bowed. "Mister, you're here." Yu Qianzhou smiled and nodded. His main purpose of coming here was to inform Shi Wenguang of the news from the capital, and to let Shi Wenguang know that his family was safe, so that he could focus on his rebellion. The two sat down, and after explaining the situation in the capital, Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, "Great General, I have a request." Shi Wenguang waved his hand and smiled, "Mister, please don't joke around. With Mister's ability, what request do you have for me? I should be the one asking for a favor." Yu Qianzhou didn't speak any more nonsense. If he continued, the innate spiritual roots outside would be beheaded. He immediately said with a solemn expression, "I'm not joking. Just now, I saw a person who will be executed at noon. I hope that General can be merciful and give this person to me. I have great use for him." Shi Wenguang looked at his son suspiciously. He suspected that his son was the one who begged Yu Qianzhou to save Zhang Peng. Shirin Tian smiled bitterly and waved his hand, "Father, please don't doubt me. It really has nothing to do with me. General, please don't think too much." Yu Qianzhou paused and said, "Let me explain it to you this way. When I passed by the execution ground, I discovered that Zhang Peng is not an ordinary person. He has excellent spiritual roots and I wish to take him as my disciple. I hope that General can give me this face." "So that's how it is. I will naturally give Mr. Face." Shi Wenguang stood up and took out a token from the bottle on the table. He handed it to Shirin Tian and said, "Pass down my order. Zhang Peng's execution is to be postponed and brought to my tent." Shirin Tian's face lit up with joy. He received the token and respectfully said, "This general will obey." Yu Qianzhou laughed and continued to converse with Shi Wenguang. Not long after, the tied-up Zhang Peng was brought in by Shirin Tian. Shi Wenguang sat behind the table and stared at the newcomer with a gloomy expression. "Criminal General Zhang Peng greets General." Zhang Peng's voice was loud and clear as he knelt down. Yu Qianzhou, who was sitting not far from him, could feel the valiant aura coming from his body. Shi Wenguang shouted in a deep voice, "Zhang Peng, you have violated the military rules and should be beheaded. However, there is an expert who begged this general to accept you as his disciple. If you agree to be his disciple, this general can consider sparing your life." Yu Qianzhou smiled as he stared at Zhang Peng, thinking that he would definitely accept this person as his disciple. Who wouldn't want to live? Who would have thought that Zhang Peng would look around, and after his gaze paused on Shi Wenguang, he replied, "I wonder which expert wishes to accept me as his disciple, please enlighten me." Shi Wenguang raised his finger and pointed. Yu Qianzhou stood up and smiled, "It's me. Criminal General would rather accept death." Zhang Peng glanced at him and said nothing else. Everyone in the tent was stunned. Yu Qianzhou asked suspiciously, "What's wrong with being my disciple? You would rather die than submit?" Zhang Peng knelt down and sized him up, then snorted coldly, "Judging from your age, you're not even as old as I am. How can you be my master? If I submit, wouldn't it be a great humiliation to me? How would I dare to submit?" "Impudent." Shi Wenguang immediately shouted, "Mister, accepting you as his disciple is your fortune. You really don't know what's good for you. Men drag him away and behead him." "Wait." Yu Qianzhou smiled and waved his hand, stopping the general from showing off his military might. He circled around Zhang Peng twice and said, "How can I be your master? I have the strength to lift 1,000 caddies, and the courage to conquer the 3 armies. If you can defeat me, I will take you as my master." Zhang Peng proudly declared. "Damn it. If it weren't for your innate spiritual root, I wouldn't care if you were dead or alive. You're just a commoner and you want to fight me?" Yu Qianzhou sneered, "Your strength is like an ant in my eyes. Your bravery is nothing in my eyes. You think too highly of yourself. If I want to defeat you, it'll be as easy as lifting a finger." Then a bewitching red light flashed on the tip of his finger, and in the blink of an eye, the ropes that Zhang Peng had tied him up broke. Yu Qianzhou shouted, "Get up, show me what you've got. I want to see what you're capable of." Zhang Peng looked at the neatly broken ropes on his chest and was stunned for a moment. He then shook off the ropes, stood up and stretched his body. His bones cracked and he cupped his fists and shouted, "Excuse me, watch my fist. Damn it. He's really not holding back." Yu Qianzhou circulated his true yuan and pointed a finger at Zhang Peng's fist. The fist and finger collided in the air. Yu Qianzhou sneered while Zhang Peng's face twitched. He felt that the half of his body that had punched out had gone numb, and he couldn't move at all. The winner was decided, and the sure father and son looked at each other in dismay. So powerful. Yu Qianqiu retracted his finger and said with an expressionless face, "If you're not convinced, you can try again." Zhang Peng's body took a long time to recover. He stretched his body but didn't say a word. He walked to the weapons rack at the side of the tent, and took out a long steel spear that was as thick as a baby's arm. He shouted, "Again." His strong body pounced at Yu Qianqiu, and like a bolt of lightning, the spear went straight for Yu Qianqiu's chest. Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly, and his index finger glowed with a demonic red light again, and he pointed it at the spear's head. With a sizzling sound, the spear began to melt from the spearhead all the way to the end of Zhang Peng's hand. The spear fell to the ground like molten iron. Zhang Peng only felt his hand burning, and he hurriedly threw the spear away. However, he didn't give up, and threw another punch at his opponent's face. "Umph." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly, intending to teach him a lesson. He retracted the red light on his finger, and flicked away Zhang Peng's heavy fist. Then he quickly pointed at Zhang Peng's chest. Zhang Peng immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, and his whole body was sent flying by the finger. He flipped a few times in the air and fell to the ground. He looked like he was on the verge of death. The sure father and son were shocked once again, and they looked at each other speechlessly. Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly stared at the person moaning on the ground. He said coldly, "What strength pulling 1,000 caddies? What bravery! You can't even compare to one of my fingers. How can you say that? Is this all you have? You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. If you're not convinced and you still have the strength, you can try again." Zhang Peng clutched his chest and his whole body seemed to collapse. His face was pale and he staggered to his feet. He staggered to the front of Yu Qianqiu and knelt down. He kowtowed and said, "Zhang Peng is convinced and pays his respects to master." Chapter 258. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him in surprise. He had thought that with his wild and untamed character, he wouldn't give in so easily. He was prepared to torture him again and completely tame him. He didn't expect him to be someone who knew how to adapt to circumstances. He was a promising talent. He allowed him to kneel on the ground and ignored him. Yu Qianqiu summoned 10 hero members and rewarded them generously, encouraging them to continue to work hard and protect Shi Wenguang's safety. Of course, the material rewards were quite generous too. After getting the 10 people to return to their positions, Yu Qianqiu smiled at Shi Wenguang and said, "There's still a long way to go in the future. General, please take care of yourself. I, Yu Qianqiu, will bid farewell here." "Farewell, mister." The father and son couldn't get him to stay, so they could only cup their hands and send him off. When he raised his head again, Yu Qianqiu was already gone. The tower-like man on the ground had also disappeared. Shi Wenguang stopped and sighed. It's a pity that little Tian isn't as good as him. In Utopia, Zhang Peng looked around and was a little confused. Yu Qianqiu said coldly, "You might be considered a fierce general in the mortal world, but here, anyone is stronger than you. I'll give you a chance to break away from the conflicts of mortals. Grasp it well. When the time comes, you'll know how insignificant you are." Guan Yu rode his horse over, and Yu Qianqiu felt a headache when he saw the broken horse. He said calmly, "This is my second disciple. Bring him to train with Hongqi. You must supervise him strictly." Guan Yu frowned. He didn't understand why Yu Qianqiu would take in disciples one after another. He nodded and shouted to Zhang Peng, "Follow me." "Good horse." Zhang Peng stared at Red Rabbit and couldn't help but exclaim. He was a soldier who had galloped on the battlefield, so he was naturally fond of good horses. When he turned back, Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared. He immediately ran after the horse. Inside Hibiscus's room in Wanfen Garden, a man and a woman were locked in the room. Just as they were about to lose control of themselves, a loud moan suddenly rang out. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He quickly covered her mouth and said guiltily, "Grand and lower your voice." Hibiscus's amorous feelings were boundless. She shyly said, "I couldn't help it." Just as he finished speaking, he heard the door open with a bang. Ferdinand shouted, "How dare you?" His voice stopped abruptly. What entered his eyes was a naked man and woman flashing into the quilt. Yu Qianqiu poked his head out and smiled shyly, "Elder? Elder Fei, long time no see." After seeing it clearly, Ferdinand's body swayed and he almost couldn't stand still. His expression was twitching non-stop. Needless to say, the other person was definitely his daughter. There were hurried footsteps coming from outside the courtyard. Ferdinand took a breath and walked out of the door. With his back facing the room he shouted, "It's okay. Go back." There was a rustling sound of clothes being put on. After a while Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding behind Hibiscus, walked to the door. Both of their expressions were quite interesting. The former smiled awkwardly, "Elder Fei?" "Hee." Ferdinand resisted the urge to kill this kid and said in a low voice, "Hibiscus stays. You come with me." "Damn it. I'm so embarrassed. I'm actually caught in bed. Why does this old guy walk without making a sound? I didn't even have time to run away." At this time Yu Qianqiu's expression was very depressed. He squeezed out a smile to bid farewell to the extremely shy Hibiscus and followed his future father-in-law. Passing through the courtyard corridor, they turned into a dark room. Ferdinand faced a wall and didn't say anything for a long time. Yu Qianqiu stood behind and wanted to say something but didn't dare to say anything. So, the two of them were wasting time there. "How did you come?" Ferdinand, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke. His attitude was not bad. Yu Qianqiu breathed a sigh of relief and said bluntly, "I stole it." The former did not continue to linger on this topic. He sighed and said, "Do you come often?" "Not often. I come every few days," Yu Qianqiu answered very honestly. Ferdinand, who had his back to him, twitched his face again. Anyone who saw his daughter lying on the same bed with another man in an improper manner would not feel comfortable, especially the kind of man who visited frequently. "I want you to promise me one thing." Ferdinand resisted the urge and turned around to stare at him. As for the previous form of questioning, he would not say it even if he was beaten to death. Otherwise he would really be angered to death. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, Tell me. As long as I can do it, I will promise you. I want you to promise me that no matter what happens, you can't let Furong suffer any grievances in this life. Otherwise I will never let you go." Ferdinand stared at him and added fiercely, "I will not let you go even if I die. Don't worry about this." Yu Qianqiu grinned and said. Obviously the other party did not object to him sleeping with his daughter. He immediately patted his chest and promised, "Even if you don't say it, I will not let Furong suffer any grievances. At least I can swear to God that I, Yu Qianqiu, will let Furong live a carefree life. Otherwise she will never be at peace." Hearing him swear, Ferdinand nodded slightly. His tight face finally relaxed. He pointed to the chair on the side and let him sit down. Then he sighed and said, "Furong's mother died early. It's all my fault. Otherwise, Furong wouldn't have to suffer so much. I'm sorry for her and her mother. So, I can see that Furong likes you very much, so I hope you can treat her well." Needless to say. However, you don't have to blame yourself. I believe you must have your difficulties. Yu Qianqiu comforted him hypocritically. He felt refreshed and comfortable now. Speaking of Furong's suffering, he suddenly frowned and said, "Elder Ferdinand, let me ask you something. What happened to Furong's face? It can't be an accident, right?" Hearing that, a trace of bitterness flashed across Ferdinand's face. He shook his head and said, "It's all my fault. It's all my fault." He painfully told the ins and outs of the matter. It turned out that Furong's mother was also a female disciple of Wanfen Garden. Her appearance was incomparable in Wanfen Garden. This could be seen from Furong's appearance. However, when she had sex with Ferdinand, the latter was already Lan Bingshue's husband. To put it bluntly, Furong's birth was the result of Ferdinand's affair with a female disciple of the garden. In the cultivation world, it was normal for a man to have more than one woman. However, Lan Bingshue could not tolerate it, so a tragedy happened. Speaking of Lan Bingshue, there was a secret that outsiders didn't know. Lan Bingshue was not a human but a monster. She was a jade toad that had cultivated for more than 1,000 years. She was born with an ice spell, and her cultivation had reached the early stage of crossing calamity. She was the pet of Ma Jiugu's father, who was the former sect master of Fuxin Island. At that time she hadn't transformed into a human yet. After Ma Jiugu's father died, she followed Ma Jiugu. After transforming into a human, she lived in seclusion. Very few people on Fuxin Island knew her identity. They only knew that she served Ma Jiugu all year round. Because of Ma Jiugu's reputation, no one dared to ask about her. At that time, Ferdinand hadn't taken charge of Wanfen Garden yet. He was just one of the outstanding disciples in the garden. Coincidentally, he had the opportunity to visit Lan Bingshue often. The two of them fell in love and became cultivation companions. However, he didn't know that she was a monster at that time and no one told him. Later, with Lan Bingshue's help, Ma Jiugu passed the position of the principal elder of Wanfen Garden to Ferdinand. On the night when Ferdinand took charge of Wanfen Garden, Lan Bingxue naively thought that her husband would accept the fact that she was a monster after helping him so much. So, she told him about her background and her background. Ferdinand was shocked, but he didn't show it at that time. However, he felt a knot in his heart and gradually had the tendency to alienate her. Then he met the beautiful Furong's mother. After a long time, something that shouldn't have happened between them. They had been secretly communicating with each other. It was not until Furong was born that this matter was exposed. After knowing this, Lan Bingxue was angry, but she didn't say anything. When Ferdinand left Wanfen Garden, she completely exploded. Not only did she torture Furong's mother, but she also swallowed her mother. She even threw Furong, who was still in swaddling clothes, into a brazier, intending to burn her alive. Fortunately, Ma Jiugu appeared in time and saved Furong. If it were someone else, Lan Bingxue wouldn't have let them go even if they had rushed to the scene. Furong's face, which was saved, was also left with an indelible scar from being burned by the fire. After Ferdinand came back to know this, he wanted to fight with Lan Bingxue. However, Ma Jiugu came to mediate and became the middleman. She made an agreement between the two. Little Furong was then placed in the mulberry garden to grow up. Needless to say, she suffered a lot. Since then, Ferdinand and Lan Bingxue had always been harmonious on the surface but not on the inside. This was the course of the matter. After listening, Yu Qianqiu touched his chin and sneered, "I was wondering why I felt cold when I got close to her. It turns out that she's a jade toad that has been cultivating for 1,000 years. She even practiced some ice spell. In the end, it's all my fault." Ferdinand's face was full of self-blame as he shook his head in pain. "This matter can't be blamed on you. The biggest responsibility still belongs to that toad monster." Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and said in a deep voice, "It's said that the most vicious thing is a woman's heart. It's indeed true. I don't care what the reason is and I don't care when it happened. Damn it. You dare to lay your hands on my woman. You have to pay me back with interest." Chapter 259. Hearing this, Ferdinand slowly turned around, frowned, and immediately warned, "Don't mess around. Lan Bingxue is always with Ma Jiugu. She's not someone you can afford to provoke. I've heard about what you've been doing recently. Although you have that overbearing fire spell, you're still in the core formation stage after all. The horror of the final stage of passing calamity is not something you can imagine. Compared to the early stage of passing calamity like me, it's a world of difference. Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for Furong. He's a bit like a father-in-law now." Yu Qianqiu laughed, I understand. While saying this, he was thinking about when he would have a chance. "Also," Ferdinand said solemnly, "I don't know how you entered Fuxian Island, but I advise you not to run around on the island. Once you're discovered, it'll be difficult for you to leave." Yu Qianqiu repeatedly said yes, then listened to a lot of nagging. He really didn't want to listen anymore, so he found an excuse to run to Furong. After saying goodbye to Furong, he returned to Utopia to find Bai Suzhen to talk about some things. Then the two of them went to the spiritual herb garden together. The exotic flowers and plants in the garden were swaying. They were all grown from the things Yu Qianqiu collected. Now this spiritual herb garden was managed by a group of women under Bai Suzhen. Because of the purple chaos, it didn't take much effort to grow the spiritual herbs, no matter how time-consuming and laborious it was. The two of them came to a ridge, looking at the hundreds of 7-star blood orchids. Yu Qianqiu touched his nose and laughed, then walked to a row of blood orchids that had just grown and not yet matured, asked someone to dig out 2, put them in a wooden basin and put them in his hands, looking at them with great interest. Bai Suzhen stared at his every move, then suddenly said, "Don't you have the recipe for 7 orifices exquisite pill? Why not refine some to help your parents prolong their lives?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a bitter smile. "Do you think I don't want to? I've already looked through the pill recipe several times, so I'm more familiar with it than you. This 7 orifices exquisite pill had the ability to seize the fortune of the heavens and earth. After consuming it, one would be able to compete with the heavens and earth for longevity. It was truly extraordinary. If he wanted to refine it, he needed a total of 3 main ingredients. Although he now had the 7-star blood orchid and the adumbra flower, he still lacked an extremely difficult-to-find spiritual herb called the resurrection grass. Adumbra guarding the spirit, soul recovery, and 7 stars bodybuilding. As long as one of the 3 was missing, it would be impossible to refine such a heaven-defying pill. But these 3 spiritual herbs are rare treasures that can only be found by luck. To be honest, I was lucky to obtain the first 2, but I really don't know if I will have the fortune to obtain all 3. Mortals can live for 50 years and cultivators can live for 150 years. To be able to compete with the heavens and earth in terms of lifespan, this kind of elixir is indeed heaven-defying. Bai Suzhen said it herself, feeling a little incredulous. If there really was a 7 orifices exquisite pill in the cultivation world, I'm afraid the entire cultivation world would be stirred up by a storm of blood. Especially those cultivators at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage. Although they have lived for hundreds of years, how many of them would be willing to return to the earth after hundreds of years of bitter cultivation? The temptation of being able to live for another 150 years was not an ordinary one. It was even possible for old monsters of the soul formation stage to come out. This thing really isn't something that ordinary people can enjoy. As Yu Qianqiu said this, he also laughed. Just think about it, how could he resist the temptation of increasing his lifespan by 150 years? If he knew which family had it, he was afraid that the hero would turn out in full force to snatch it. Then where does this resurrection grass grow? The pill recipe seems to have introduced the characteristics of each spiritual herb, right? Bai Suzhen asked. She had more or less seen it when she removed the restrictions on the pill recipe. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, according to the pill recipe Jade Archive, this recipe was passed down from ancient times and didn't originate from the alchemy sect. Later on, no one has succeeded in refining it. The ancient records of the resurrection grass referred to it as the 9 underworlds. Bai Suzhen frowned and pondered, which place in this world is called the 9 underworlds? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, the pill recipe Jade Archive didn't record it in detail. It was just casually mentioned, so I didn't know about it before. But his expression changed and he laughed mischievously. But when the Wu family's patriarch Wu Sihai saw my Ghost King's token, he mentioned a place and it immediately made me realize. If I didn't guess wrongly, the 9 underworlds is the place he mentioned. Sister, have you heard of the 9 underworlds cavern? Hearing this, Bai Suzhen was shocked and said, you mean the 9 underworlds cavern which is divided into 9 levels? Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, that's right. Wu Sihai was talking about that place. I'm guessing that the 9 underworlds cavern is the 9 underworlds cavern. Bai Suzhen was startled and said, if the resurrection grass really grows in the 9 underworlds cavern, who in the world can harvest it? Legend has it that the 9 underworlds cavern is connected to the netherworld, which is as famous as the immortal realm. Generally speaking, ghost cultivators at the end of the Ghost King's cultivation level wouldn't dare to go there. Even deity transformation cultivators can only go there lightly. How can ordinary cultivators harvest the resurrection grass? That's just my guess. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, I'm going to the demon ghost domain to find the ghost general Meng Yan. It won't be too late to find out more about it. Bai Suzhen frowned and moved her red lips. Finally, she stared at the blood orchids in his hand and changed the topic, asking, are you giving these 2 blood orchids to someone? Yu Qianqiu was stunned and said, giving them to someone? How is that possible? One of them can be sold for tens of millions of high-grade spirit stones. I'm selling them. Selling? Bai Suzhen was stunned. She was in charge of the spirit stones of the entire Utopia, and it seemed that Utopia was not short of spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu looked at the blood orchids in his hand, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He said, I heard that Ang Kuang-tsung was robbed of 100 million high-grade spirit stones last time. I think those big sects are even richer. Anyway, our blood orchids can't be used up. It's not bad to exchange some spirit stones from them. He naturally had his own plans for doing this. Spirit stones were the foundation to maintain the operation of the various sections. He was very worried that the various sects were so rich. If he wanted to weaken the strength of the cultivation world, he had to cooperate with the economic offensive. He had already made up his mind to throw out some good things every once in a while. Things like the 7-star blood orchids were very attractive and could definitely make the various sects spend a lot of money. However, he didn't want the blood orchids to really play their role, so he deliberately picked 2 pots of blood orchids that had not yet fully grown. Even if the various sects really bought them, they wouldn't be able to mature without a few decades, unless the various sects had treasures like the wood spiritual liquid that could accelerate the growth of the blood orchids. Wu Lixue often lingered in the courtyard of the quiet guest house, where the Wu family hosted guests, ever since Yu Qianqiu left. In the room where Yu Qianqiu had stayed, Wu Lixue was in a daze as she hugged the so-called Zhu egg. The scene of Yu Qianqiu telling everyone in the Gulu house that she was his woman appeared in her mind again. She finally got rid of the thoughts in her mind with great difficulty. In the blink of an eye, that face with a smirk appeared again. Wu Lixue shook her head and sighed faintly. It was really hopeless. Why did she always think of him? Unfortunately, no matter how she shook her head, the illusory image was still in front of her. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, she saw the bad guy waving at her. "Beauty, why are you shaking your head?" Chapter 260. The last time Yu Qianqiu stayed in this room, he had hidden a teleportation mark. As soon as he came out, he found Wu Lixue in a daze talking to herself. He appeared in front of her, but she actually ignored him. It was quite depressing. Wu Lixue shook her head again. It must be an illusion. She continued to walk out. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He couldn't help but grab her arm, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Am I invisible?" Wu Lixue rubbed her eyes in disbelief. She was dumbfounded. It's really you, Yu Qianqiu. When did you come?" Yu Qianqiu stretched out a hand and waved it in front of her eyes. Seeing her eyes following his gesture, he heaved a sigh of relief. "I thought there was something wrong with your eyes." Wu Lixue slapped his hand away and said angrily, "There's something wrong with your eyes." "Eeh. How could there be something wrong with my eyes?" Yu Qianqiu joked, his eyes occasionally glancing at her full and perky breasts. He was extremely envious of the egg in her arms. After secretly looking at it, he asked with a smile, "Your egg hasn't hatched yet?" Wu Lixue no longer had that dejected look. She threw the egg into her storage pouch. She didn't want to let the egg take the limelight. She asked excitedly, "When did you come?" "Just arrived." "Come bring me to see your grandfather," Yu Qianqiu said as he walked out. "Just arrived?" Wu Lixue was full of doubts. She bounced to the front to lead the way and asked as she walked, "Do you need something from my grandfather? How long are you staying this time? Do you want to play with my brother for a bit longer?" And Wu Lixue kept asking questions while Yu Qianqiu stammered in response. He didn't pay attention to what she was saying at all. His eyes were fixated on the sexy but in front of him, unable to move away. Wu Lixue, who was walking in front, turned around unhappily when she heard Yu Qianqiu's words. She immediately noticed Yu Qianqiu's gaze and her pretty face turned red. She immediately turned around and silently walked forward. It was hard to tell if she was angry or shy. She no longer dared to jump up and down. Even her normal walk was a bit unnatural. Outside the Wu clan ancestral hall, Wu Lixue explained the purpose of her visit to the gate, and the guard immediately went in to report. After a while, Wu Sihai came out with 3 old men laughing and said, "Yu Qianqiu, this old man has been looking forward to seeing you." He then frowned and said, "What's going on with the clan's guards? Why did you only report now that you're here?" Yu Qianqiu laughed and vaguely said, "Wu Lixue brought me here." He naturally wouldn't say that he snuck in. Wu Lixue nodded dumbly, "Grandfather, I brought him here." "You are Yu Qianqiu?" one of the old men behind Wu Sihai asked. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu also looked at the 3 old men. Looking at their clothing, they should be from the other 3 clans. "Yes, he is Yu Qianqiu." Wu Sihai introduced both sides. "The 4 clans' leaders are all here?" Yu Qianqiu bowed, "Greetings to the 4 seniors." "Well said." The 4 nodded. Wu Sihai waved his hand, "Let's go, we'll talk inside." The 5 of them entered the Wu clan's ancestral hall together. Outside, Wu Lixue stomped her feet, pouting unhappily. Who told her to be a woman, and the clan rules forbade women from entering. As she paced back and forth, she recalled Yu Qianqiu's gaze. Her pretty face couldn't help but turn red, and she left as if she was fleeing. Aside from Wu Sihai, the other 3 were constantly looking at Yu Qianqiu, wanting to see what was so special about Yu Qianqiu's fame. Yu Qianqiu's gaze returned to the portrait of Bai Changchun in the main hall. Thinking about the possibility of meeting this legendary character in the demon domain, his heart surged. Wu Sihai broke the silence, laughing, "Yu Qianqiu, you came here to fulfill your promise to this old man?" Yu Qianqiu turned his head, "Yes, I have to fulfill my promise. I heard that you are very familiar with the demon domain. What should we prepare for this trip?" Bai Shoji asked. This time he was going to look for his ancestor. It could be said that his mood was the most indescribable. "I can't say I'm familiar with it, I've only been there before. As for the preparations, you can just send someone with me. With me around, there shouldn't be any danger," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. What big words. Was the demon domain a place to be trifled with? The 4 exchanged looks. Wu Sihai was very confident in Xiaoqin. He chuckled, "How many people should we send?" Yu Qianqiu pondered for a moment, then said, "We don't need too many people. If there are too many, it might cause unnecessary trouble. Just send a few people that the 4 clans can trust." The 4 exchanged looks and nodded at each other, as if they had reached some kind of agreement. Wu Sihai said with a smile. Yu Qianqiu, how about the four of us go with you? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. His original idea was that it would be best to get Bai Zizong and the others to go. He had a good relationship with them and he believed that the journey would not be lonely. However, the four old guys obviously wanted to take over his place. He nodded and said, if the four seniors want to go, this junior naturally has no objection. Good. Wu Sihai clapped and said, then when do you think we should set off? No hurry, I still have something to ask seniors help with. Yu Qianqiu said as he took out 2 pots of 7-star blood orchids with a smile and placed them on the table beside him. He said, Senior, please help me auction these 2 things. Wu Sihai stared at the 2 pots of blood orchids and was a little stunned. He had handled such things before, so how could he not recognize them? The other 3 saw his appearance and did not know what kind of treasure it was. They walked over to observe it together. Didn't you buy one last time? Why are you selling 2 pots this time? Wu Sihai saw at a glance that these 2 pots of blood orchids were not the original pot. The pot in the grand auction was obviously more mature than these 2 pots. I'm short of money recently. Senior, please spread the news that the Wu family wants to auction the 7-star blood orchids. It is best to auction these 2 pots of blood orchids at a later time. This junior wants to sell them at a good price. Yu Qianqiu smiled apologetically on the side. 7-star blood orchids? These 2 pots are 7-star blood orchids? The 3 onlookers were surprised in unison. I've let the seniors see a joke. I'm really short of money. Otherwise, I wouldn't take out such a treasure to auction. I'm sorry, hee. Yu Qianqiu pretended there. Wu Sihai didn't believe that he had no money. He was looking at him up and down, not knowing what he was doing. The other 3 naturally heard about Yu Qianqiu's wealth from Wu Sihai, and they were a little puzzled. Leave the things here. I will let the Wu family handle it. The spirit stones from the auction will all be given to you without taking a single cent. It won't affect our trip to the Demon Ghost region. Wu Sihai might not know what he was doing, but he still agreed and didn't even want the commission. Sorry for the trouble. I'm short of money so I can't help it. Yu Qianqiu apologized and smiled apologetically. Chapter 261. A shuttle-shaped artifact flew quickly from the Wu clan, and it was carrying Wu Sihai's group of 5. Yu Qianqiu sat at the stern and sized up the entire artifact. He clicked his tongue and said, the Jing clan's artifact refinement skills are indeed worthy of their reputation. This artifact is better than those sold outside. The decorations are beautiful and the flight speed is so fast. Even the seat is more comfortable. Not bad, not bad. Wu Sihai looked at Jing Feihong, who was personally controlling the artifact, and smiled. It might be good, but the materials used are also frightening. Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth and wanted to say that it was fine if it was expensive as long as it was suitable. However, when he recalled how he complained about being poor, he kept his mouth shut. He was pondering if he should ask Jing's to get one for him to play next time. According to their estimations, it would take more than a day to reach the Demon Ghost region. Yu Qianqiu sat at the back and checked the core formation in his dantian. Ever since his core had absorbed the fire element, it was as if there was a fire seed inside. His entire core was activated. He didn't need to cultivate and he could absorb the true essence to solidify. His dantian continuously absorbed the true essence day and night, causing Yu Qianqiu to absorb the spirit qi in the spirit stones and refine it into true essence. Right now he had nothing to do, so he secretly pinched a piece of spirit stone to replenish the qi in his body. He didn't know when he fell asleep, but when the heroine of the dream, Wu Lixue, was sacrificing herself, he suddenly heard someone calling him. Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes unwillingly, and it was Wu Sihai who called him. He swallowed the saliva in his mouth and thought, if only it was a little later, your granddaughter would be naked soon. He smacked his lips and said, what is it? The 4 of them looked at each other and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They were about to enter such a terrifying place like the Demon Ghost region, but this fellow wasn't worried at all and could even sleep? On the other hand, the 4 of them felt relieved. Originally they were worried that Yu Qianqiu was bragging, but when they saw him being so relaxed and confident, they felt more at ease. Wu Sihai waved his hand and pointed at the flying shuttle and said, the Demon Ghost region is in front. Which direction should we go? So soon? Yu Qianqiu got up in a daze and walked to the head of the shuttle. In front of him, the land was covered by a boundless gloomy fog. Compared with the bright sunshine behind the shuttle, it was like another world. Standing on the flying shuttle in the air, he could occasionally hear the gloomy and horrible screams coming from the gloomy fog. This scene was so familiar. Where else could it be other than the demon region? We've also entered the outskirts of the demon ghost realm, but we don't dare to go any deeper. I heard that the top 3 sects of the righteous and demonic paths would send their disciples to compete in the demon domain every few years. I don't know if that's true or not, but I always felt that it was strange. However, it was not a good place to investigate. You have stayed on Supporting Immortal Island before, so you should know something, right? Wuxia asked. *T competition. Yu Qianqiu looked ahead and identified the direction they were heading in. He sneered and said, "It's just nice words. The top 3 sects of the righteous and demonic paths send their disciples here to gain experience and use the demon ghost region to temper their disciples. Originally they could just train separately, but this place is too dangerous. Even if the weaker sects work together, the more people they have, the easier it is to attract more demons and ghosts, making it more dangerous. However, even Supporting Immortal Island can't handle it alone. Therefore the top 3 sects of the righteous and demonic paths gathered together and come here every few years. They even made up a lie to deceive the righteous and demonic paths. However, the last time they came here they encountered some trouble. I'm afraid they won't dare to come again." In any case, he was no longer a disciple of Supporting Immortal Island. Moreover, he couldn't wait for the righteous and demonic paths to be in chaos. Naturally, there was no need to hide it. Yu Qianqiu turned back and smiled at the 4 of them. "Do you know what trouble the 6 sects encountered?" The 4 of them shook their heads. He stared at the 4 of them and chuckled. They were beaten up by a single person. 5 consecrators and 10 elders of Supporting Immortal Island were injured at the same time. Do you know who injured them? It's none other than the person you are looking for. The 4 of them exclaimed at the same time. Bai Shouji was so excited that his body trembled. He said, "Is the person you are talking about our ancestor?" "That's right." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "It's your ancestor, Bai Changchun. Your ancestor is amazing. TSK. That level of cultivation really leaves people speechless." Hearing that, the 4 of them breathed heavily. They stared ahead and seemed a little impatient. "The flying shuttle can't fly too low. Try to fly as high as possible. Otherwise, it will be easy for us to be attacked." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and pointed to the left. He said, "It's that direction. Fly as fast as you can. Soon you will see a tall mountain that pierces through the clouds. That is the Cloudy Sky Peak. We will land on the peak." "Got it?" Although Jing Feihong was old, he still couldn't hide his excitement. The flying shuttle quickly soared into the sky and suddenly accelerated. It turned into a stream of light and flew in the direction Yu Qianqiu pointed. About 2 hours later, a towering mountain appeared in front of them. The 4 of them looked at each other and nodded. Yu Qianqiu really wasn't talking nonsense. The flying shuttle flew at full speed. Soon it reached the peak and slowly descended. "Come down. If we want to go deeper, we can only walk. Otherwise, we won't be able to guard against sudden dangers." Yu Qianqiu said and jumped down first. The others followed. Jing Feihong put away his flying artifact. Yu Qianqiu looked around. After identifying the direction they went down the mountain last time, he waved his hand and led the others to go around. However, when they went around to the other side of the mountain, the 5 of them were stunned. Their expressions were full of disbelief. Under the bright sunlight on the mountain top, there was a palanquin made of green vines. The palanquin should have been covered with light muslin, but it was now rolled up. A scholarly man was leaning on the palanquin. He was holding a book in his hand and reading it under the sun. Not far from the palanquin stood 4 strong men. From their clothes, they seemed to be the subordinates of the man who was reading. The 4 of them stared expressionlessly at the people who had suddenly appeared. The 5 of them were shocked and looked at each other. There was actually someone reading in a place like this. It was a little too unbelievable. Wu Sihai and the other 3 looked at Yu Qianqiu. They didn't know if he knew who this person was. Yu Qianqiu hadn't seen this person the last time he came here. How could he be leisurely traveling in a place like this? Was this something an ordinary person could do? This place wasn't something an ordinary person could come to. His mind raced. After some analysis, he already had some suspicions about who this person was. However, he didn't dare to be sure. After all, anything could happen in this place. The man in the palanquin didn't seem to notice their arrival. After he finished reading the book in his hand, he elegantly flipped a page and held the book in his hand. He stood up, squinted his eyes and stretched lazily. He turned to the others and smiled gently. "It's rare for guests to come to the demon domain. I didn't expect to run into them today. Chapter 262. I didn't expect to meet such an elegant person at the cloudy sky peak of the Monster Ghost region. I really wonder if this place is still the Monster Ghost region. Yu Qianqiu looked around and said with a smile, there are two masters in this area. One is in charge of Yin and the other is in charge of Yang. Since you can be so carefree on the cloudy sky peak, could you be the Yang master, Demon King Aoli? The man's elegant expression changed slightly. He looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise and asked doubtfully, who are you? How do you know my name? Ghost General Meng Yan mentioned you to me before, Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. Actually, he was just guessing. Although he knew that there was a Monster King here, he had never heard Meng Yan mention Aoli. He only knew that the Monster King here was called Aoli from Ferdinand. However, it was obvious that he had guessed correctly. Big brother mentioned me to you before? Aoli looked at him again and said doubtfully, could you be Yu Qianqiu? Yes, I am. Yu Qianqiu slowly raised the Black Ghost King token in his hand and said with a smile, it seems that General Meng also mentioned me to you before. When Aoli saw the Ghost King token, all his doubts disappeared. They looked at each other and said at the same time, it's an honor to meet you. As soon as the same words were said, both of them were slightly stunned. Then they laughed at the same time. Wuxia and the others were shocked at first. They did not expect this person to be the Demon King of this place. When they saw the two of them talking and laughing, they immediately felt relieved. This Yu Qianqiu was indeed not an ordinary person. The two of them walked closer while laughing. Their expressions showed that they appreciated each other. Yu Qianqiu stood in front of Aoli and sized him up again. He clicked his tongue in admiration and said, I'm going to say something that might make Senior unhappy. If I didn't know Senior's identity, with Senior's refined and elegant temperament, who would know that Senior is the demon lord of this place? Hearing this, Aoli's joyful expression was a little hard to conceal. Although he was a member of the demon clan, he had always admired the elegance of humans, so he imitated them in many ways. Yu Qianqiu's words could be said to flatter the other party, and sure enough, for a moment he had a favorable impression of Yu Qianqiu. Of all the things that are inferior, only studying is superior. He laughed heartily and said, looked at himself and shook his head. What's there to be happy about? Since you are Brother Meng's friend, you are also my friend. Elegant demeanor, if you have anything really to say, just feel ashamed of my inferiority. In truth, Yu Qianqiu found it strange as soon as he saw only studying is superior. It was not strange for a majestic demonic beast and his eyes transformed into a human form. Seeing Yu Qianqiu's ashamed expression, he immediately patted his shoulder and said with a smile, then he must be addicted to such things. Brother Yu, there's no need to be like this. This kind of Tao of sourness is just my personal hobby. It's not worth mentioning, it's really not worth mentioning. Yu Qianqiu's inconspicuous flattery immediately made Aoli's spirit soar as if he had been injected with chicken blood. His face was in high spirits. It didn't look like he was comforting someone, it was clearly a blow to someone else. However, it could be seen that Aoli was indeed happy. In just a few words, the way he addressed Yu Qianqiu had already changed to Brother Yu. If Meng Yan heard Aoli say that his Tao was the Tao of sourness, he would definitely be dumbfounded. In the past, Meng Yan had casually said something like this, and Aoli almost fell out with him on the spot. But now he was belittling himself. Not far away, the four bearers who were carrying Aoli's palanquin were also in disbelief. They had never heard Aoli belittle himself like this before. Such words were taboo for Aoli. Not to mention himself, others couldn't even mention it. The four of them looked at Yu Qianqiu with admiration. Wuxia and the others didn't know the details. Seeing Demon King Aoli and Yu Qianqiu calling each other brother, they could only sigh at Yu Qianqiu's remarkable abilities. His connections were so wide that he could even move freely in the Demon Ghost region. Brother, cheer up. It's our first time meeting. Don't make it so unlucky. Aoli saw that he was still a little depressed, so he comforted him again. Sister Yuji is full of praise for you. She said that you are so talented that even I can't compare with you. I was not convinced at first, but after hearing your song Love Country More Love Beauty, I am convinced. At this point, if he continued to pretend, it would be a little pretentious. Yu Qianqiu coughed twice and said embarrassedly, song is just a strange and obscene skill. How can it compare with Brother Ao's true elegance? Let's not talk about it. He also hit the snake by the root and called him Brother Ao. Aoli laughed and said, okay, let's stop here. Then he glanced at Wuxia and the others and asked, Brother, what is your purpose in coming to the Demon Ghost region this time? Yu Qianqiu's expression became serious and he said, I really have something to do here. I am going to the Valley of Evil Wind, to ask General Meng for help. Ah, you and I hit it off at first sight. In that case, I will go with you to the Valley of Evil Wind, and ask for a drink from Brother Meng. Then he waved to the 4 people behind him and said, "You go back first." The 4 strong men respectfully took the order, lifted the green rattan sedan and left. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I haven't been to the Valley of Evil Wind, so I don't know the way. If I can follow Brother Ao, it will save me a lot of trouble." "Brother. You are welcome." Aoli patted him and floated in the air. He raised his hand and pointed to the south and said, "Let's go." Yu Qianqiu nodded to Wu Sihai and the others to follow him. A long sword popped out and carried him to fly after Aoli. Wu Sihai and the others were at the crossing calamity stage, so they didn't need to fly on a sword. They followed behind Yu Qianqiu at a distance. The 6 of them swooped down in the air, pierced through the dense clouds, and flew into the gloomy and terrifying demon ghost realm. Aoli flew beside Yu Qianqiu, and the 2 of them talked and laughed along the way. As for the 4 people following behind, Aoli didn't even bother to look at them, and he didn't even bother to ask who they were. The Demon King had the arrogance of a demon king. Wu Sihai and the others didn't dare to interrupt. The prestige of the Demon King gave them great pressure. This was the first time that Wu Sihai and the others went so deep into the demon ghost realm. They kept looking around and saw that there were all kinds of scary monsters, and they all stared at them greedily. But when they saw Aoli in front of them, they all hurriedly retreated. Some of them didn't have time to retreat and even knelt down to worship. Wherever Aoli went, all kinds of strange sounds would be heard, and no one dared to make a sound. The 4 of them were shocked. The prestige of the Demon King was really not just for show. Aoli and the others all flew at the speed of Yu Qianqiu. It was already dark when they arrived at the Valley of Evil Wind. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu was good at bragging, and Aoli regretted not meeting him earlier. Otherwise, how could he have the patience to accompany Yu Qianqiu to fly slowly? Wu Sihai and the others naturally didn't have any objections. Chapter 263. A mountain that stretched for dozens of miles seemed to have been fiercely chopped several times by the sharp weapons of the gods, and many cracks appeared on it. Shrill howls that sounded like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves lingered in the air. A dense, gloomy mist had covered the entire mountain, which was tens of miles wide. Specks of ghost fire were drifting in the air, and chilly winds were constantly gushing out from the mountain mouth. This was the Yin Wind Valley, where Ghost General Meng Yan lived. Before they got close, they felt a little suffocated by the ghastly qi that came from the valley. The mournful Yin wind was like a bone-piercing cold knife. Although it didn't hurt them, it seemed like it could cut into their skin and penetrate deep into their bones. The surrounding temperature also seemed to have dropped to the freezing point, making people shudder. Their minds were also erratic, as if they could be blown away if they were not careful. Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was the lowest. He frowned deeply. This Yin Wind Valley was so powerful even before they got close. Wouldn't it kill me if we got close? Aoli was calm and at ease. Firstly, his cultivation was high, and secondly, he was very familiar with this place. After sizing them up, he said to Yu Qianqiu with a smile, "If mortals came here, the Yin Wind could blow their souls out of their bodies, turning them into walking corpses. But it shouldn't be a big problem for you. As long as you stabilize your mind, the other abnormal feelings are just illusions caused by the dense Yin qi corroding your body. But this Yin Wind is somewhat destructive, and you need to circulate your qi to resist it." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was relieved. It turned out that the most frightening mental swaying was an illusion. He immediately calmed his mind. Of course, he wasn't the only one who heard this. Wu Sihai and the others, who were horrified, immediately calmed down. They moved forward against the Yin Wind. Aoli said with a smile while flying, "It is said that this Yin Wind Valley is the place with the densest Yin qi in the entire demon ghost domain. Back then, when the Ghost King fought for this place, Brother Meng led the army to suppress them, and that's how he got this treasure land." "Isn't it said that the 9th Netherworld Cave is the place with the densest Yin qi?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Aoli shook his head and said with a smile, "The 1st to 8th Netherworld Caves are nothing in the demon ghost domain. The key is that the 9th Netherworld Cave is rare. Why do you think Brother Meng fought for this place back then? It is precisely because of the rare 9 Netherworld Cave under the Yin Wind Valley that this Yin Wind Valley would not have attracted so many heroes to fight for it back then." "There's a Netherworld Cave here?" Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. His eyes lit up as he looked into the valley. When Wu Sihai and the others heard about the legendary 9th Netherworld Cave, they looked at each other in dismay. Even if they gained nothing from this trip, they would be able to leave a record in the clan register if they could learn about such a place. The 6 of them flew to the front of the valley and landed outside a valley that was shrouded in fog. Aoli shouted towards the valley, "Big brother, big sister, look who I've brought for you." The voice echoed in the valley. Not long after, Meng Yan's voice came from the deep valley, "Oh, is there an esteemed guest coming? Welcome the guest." The "welcome the guests" was obviously in order. After the words were spoken, the thick fog at the entrance of the valley began to roll. After a dull sound, the thick fog separated to form a path into the valley. A group of people rushed out with flags fluttering on both sides. A general rode forward and cupped his fists towards Aoli and said, "Greetings, King Ao." The general looked at the so-called esteemed guest. After seeing Yu Qianqiu, he was startled and said, "Mr. Yu, it's you?" This general was none other than Cai Zhangfei, the bearded man from last time. Yu Qianqiu smiled and cupped his fists. "Thank you again for sending me off last time. It's good that we are all acquaintances. Don't be long-winded. If you have something to say, let's talk inside." Aoli clapped his hands and smiled. Wu Sihai and the rest exchanged glances. Once again they were impressed by Yu Qianqiu's wide range of connections. This fellow, be it human, demon or ghost, had dealings with them all. To them it was a little unbelievable. "King Ao is right," Cai Zhangfei urged his horse to make way and waved his hand. "King Ao, please. Mr. Yu, please." He then glanced at Wu Sihai and the rest and said, "Everyone please. Big brother, prepare the wine for me." Aoli laughed loudly as he walked towards the valley. Yu Qianqiu followed with a smile. However, the four old fellows were a little reserved. To them, they had never thought that they would be able to enter deep into the demon's domain. Even more so, they did not expect to be welcomed as an esteemed guest by the legendary ghost general. Just based on this experience, there were only a few in the entire cultivation world. After going back and recording it in the clan records, it would be enough for the future generations to admire them. Thinking of this, the four of them were a little excited. Finally, they were not as reserved as before. They followed closely behind Yu Qianqiu. The terrain in the valley was all the way downwards. Both sides and the ground were paved with fluorescent stones for illumination. After about 100 meters deep, the view before them suddenly became clear. A huge stone archway that was cut into the ground stood in front of them. Two huge stone sculptures of servants were kneeling on the ground. Both of their hands were placed on the braziers on top of their heads, which were burning fiercely. Behind the archway was an underground square. Two rows of ghost soldiers holding axes crossed each other, forming a passageway. At the end of the passageway was a palace with an open door. The entire palace was richly ornamented. At first glance, one could tell that it was directly chiseled out from the entire mountain. It looked extraordinary, but in the darkness, it was eerie. It lacked the liveliness of a palace in the mortal world. Aoli walked towards the palace as if he had returned to his own home. Following behind him, Yu Qianqiu looked left and right, admiring the extravagance of this underground palace. The four old fellows did the same. They stepped on a long flight of stairs in front of the palace and ascended to the palace door step by step. Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised to find that there was a plaque on the palace door. Logically speaking, the name of some palace or hall should be engraved on it, but the plaque was smooth without a single word, which made people feel a little strange. After entering the main hall, the interior was no different from the interior of an ordinary palace. However, it exuded an ancient and simple and vigorous aura. There was only one word to describe it: grand. In front of a throne high up in the middle was a majestic general clad in golden armor. He held onto a long sword with both hands and looked at the crowd coldly, giving the people below a feeling of looking down on them from a higher position. Beside him, there was a charming woman looking at everyone with a smile. Wu Sihai and the rest looked at each other, feeling a little uneasy. From the other party's disdainful aura and his position, it was needless to say that this person must be the famous ghost general in the cultivation world. They stopped in front of the stairs under the throne. Aoli pointed behind him and said with a smile, "Big brother, look who I've brought for you." Naturally, Meng Yan had already seen Yu Qianqiu. He only nodded at him, but his eyes were unusually sharp and cold when he stared at Wu Sihai and the rest. A red and black murderous aura overflowed from his body that was covered in golden armor, carrying a powerful aura that pressed down on the four of them. Wu Sihai and the rest were shocked. When they looked at Yu Qianqiu for help, they did not forget to circulate their qi to resist. Yu Qianqiu was a little dumbfounded. He guessed that Meng Yan wanted to show off his general's prestige in front of strangers again, but he dared to act cool in front of them without finding out who these four people were. When he found out who was behind these four old fellows, let's see how you can show off later. However, he was the one who brought them here, so he could not stand aside and watch the show. He immediately stood in front of the four people and waved his hand with a wry smile. "General, I'll temporarily be your assistant." Chapter 264. The red and black baleful aura stopped above Yu Qianqiu and started to attack, looking like it was about to pounce. Meng Yan stared down and said in a low voice, "My Ghost King Hall is not a place for outsiders to enter. Mr. Yu, get out of the way. Don't hurt the friendship between us." What a shameless thing. Yu Qianqiu's face darkened, but Yu Ji was still smiling without saying a word, while Aoli turned his head to the side, acting like it was none of his business. In fact, it was not that Ghost General Meng Yan wanted to show off, but the demon ghosts trapped in the demon ghost domain were extremely unbalanced. They couldn't get out, but they couldn't let outsiders enter the demon ghost domain. Even if they didn't kill them, they had to teach them a lesson. However, how could Yu Qianqiu allow him to attack Wuxia and the others? Even if he gave up on 10,000 reasons, just the fact that they were Bai Changchun's descendants and that they might be of help to him in the future made it worth it for him to protect them. Very good. General, how are you going to deal with them? Yu Qianqiu sneered. If it were anyone else, I would kill them without mercy. But since they are Sir's friends, I naturally have to give them face. Meng Yan stared at the four of them and said expressionlessly, "Why aren't you kneeling when you see me? If you're late, you might lose your head." Hearing this, the four of them were shocked and terrified. But they were the heads of the four major clans in the cultivation world. Although death was scary, how could they throw away their dignity? Asking them to kneel was absolutely impossible. They had their pride hidden in their hearts. Humiliating their ancestors was something they wouldn't do even if they died. Among the four people, Bai Shoji took a step forward and said in a low voice, "Ghost General, if you don't welcome us, we can leave." "Why should we kneel? Let's go." The last sentence was directed at Wu Sihai and the others. The four of them immediately turned around and left. From this, it was clear that Bai Shoji was the one in charge of the four. "How dare you!" Aoli turned around and shouted fiercely, his eyes flashing. Meng Yan laughed wickedly and said, "Mr. Yu, it's not that I don't want to give you face, but your friends don't want to give me face, so don't blame me for being impolite." As soon as he finished speaking, the red and black baleful chi that was about to leap over Yu Qianqiu's head and attack the four of them. "Meng Yan is courting death." Yu Qianqiu roared. He raised his hand and a fiendish red flame was released, immediately blocking the path of the baleful aura in the air. The temperature in the hall suddenly rose to a frightening level. Aoli and the others immediately felt that the fire Yu Qianqiu had released was not normal. It was definitely not an ordinary fire, otherwise the temperature would not be so high. This fire seemed to be beyond the scope of ordinary fire, with an all-conquering young ferocity. As ghost cultivators, Meng Yan and Yu Ji immediately felt uncomfortable when they were illuminated by this fire, as if they were exposed to the scorching sun. However, Meng Yan's cultivation was not something that Yu Qianqiu could compare with. When he heard Yu Qianqiu's presumptuous words, he raised his eyebrows and let out a muffled snort. The baleful aura rushed over with a whoosh, wanting to extinguish the fire. However, he had forgotten that there was a saying in this world that there was a counter to everything else. He was a ghost cultivator, so although the baleful aura he released was vicious, it was also an item of extreme yin. Moreover, the fire that Yu Qianqiu released was close to extreme yang, so naturally it could restrain his baleful aura. Once the baleful aura came into contact with the fire, it would dissipate without a trace. Yu Qianqiu was rather angry. Previously, he had boasted to Wu Sihai in the Wu clan, saying how good his relationship with Ghost General was. He didn't expect that after he brought them here, Ghost General would immediately make a move, and it was simply a slap to his face. Seeing that the fire that he released could restrain the baleful aura, he immediately opened his palm, and boundless fire surged out, rapidly wrapping the baleful aura into a circle in the hall. Meng Yan's body shook, and he immediately felt that his divine senses had lost contact with the baleful aura. He exclaimed in his heart, "Such a powerful fire." When Bai Shoji and the others saw that Yu Qianqiu had started to fight with Ghost General for them, they exchanged glances and immediately flashed back to Yu Qianqiu's back. They held their swords and were ready to help at any time. They also knew that if something were to happen to Yu Qianqiu, they wouldn't be able to walk out of this Yinfeng Valley by themselves. In just an instant, the baleful aura that was wrapped by the raging flames didn't have any resistance, and it was cleansed in the blink of an eye. The hall was glaring red, and the merged raging flames in the sky looked exceptionally spectacular. It was like an inverted hourglass, and it turned into a line of fire with a swoosh swoosh. It was sucked back into Yu Qianqiu's palm. The raging flames were gone, and at this moment, the extreme yang qi that made Meng Yan and Yu Ji's palpitations in the hall disappeared. The couple and Ao Li sized up Yu Qianqiu with astonishment. The three of them had never seen such a technique before. I didn't expect Mr. Yu to be so secretive. It seems that I have underestimated Mr. Yu. Meng Yan sized up Yu Qianqiu with a re-examining gaze. He casually shook off the blood-red cloak he was wearing, untied the belt of the golden armor on his chest and pulled off the cloak. Together with the long sword in his other hand, he threw it to Yu Ji and shouted, "I want to see what other abilities Mr. Yu has. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Yu Qianqiu shouted on the spot. Boom. A ball of raging flames suddenly burst out from his body and wrapped his whole body in fire. He looked like a god of fire, and his momentum was no weaker than Meng Yan's. In fact, it was even stronger. In the fire, Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and cupped his fists respectfully to Bai Shouji. He said, "Senior Bai, please leave the hall first. I'm going to release the power of Star Flame." The four of them looked at each other. Bai Shouji nodded and said, "Be careful." As for Ao Li and Meng Yan, when they heard the word, Bai, they were startled. They couldn't tell what they were feeling. Yu Qianqiu noticed it and found it funny. These people were really afraid of Bai Changchun. They were even like this when they heard his surname. Later, when they found out that Bai Shouji was Bai Changchun's descendant, who knew what would happen? Although the matter could be easily solved, he still had to show others his ability. Otherwise, others would think that he was afraid of him. Face was not given by others but earned by oneself. The strange flame on Yu Qianqiu's body began to fluctuate violently. Although the fire did not grow, the temperature in the hall was rising rapidly. It was as if the air in the hall was going to be sucked dry. Ao Li, who was competing with Yu Qianqiu, was shocked. Even with his cultivation at the end of the tribulation stage, it was difficult for him to resist such high temperature. What kind of flame was this? It was so powerful. Ao Li retreated slowly without batting an eyelid. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. It seemed that the fight would not happen. Not because of anything else, but because these old monsters were afraid of Bai Shouji. However, he was slowly forcing out the remaining fire elements in his body, pushing the temperature in the hall to the extreme. He did it for no other reason than to let them know how powerful he was. The temperature in the hall had reached an unbelievable level, but it was still rising. All the air that they breathed was exhausted. The air that rushed in from the outside was also concentrated on the flame on the surface of Yu Qianqiu's body, helping to increase the temperature. The metal utensils placed in the hall had silently turned into liquid and flowed. There was a crackling sound that sounded like a fire burning everywhere. Fortunately, the whole hall was made of stone. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Meng Yan and Yu Ji panicked. Both of them realized that Yu Qianqiu's flame seemed to be able to restrain them. When the two of them were resisting the rapidly rising temperature, the yin energy in their body was disappearing rapidly. Yu Ji forced herself to calm down. She stuffed the cloak and sword back into Meng Yan's hands. "General, look at what you're doing. Of all the jokes you can make, why would you make such a joke? Look, you've angered Mr. Yu." Chapter 265. After talking about her man, Yu Ji turned to Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, "Sir, don't be angry. The general was just joking. Don't take it to heart." Joking? Yu Qianqiu knew that this woman had come out to smooth things over again. This was what this woman was best at. He didn't expose her because he didn't have much fire elements left in his body. He wouldn't be able to withstand such high temperatures for long. If this continued, he would definitely expose himself. He now regretted not replenishing his fire elements in Utopia before coming here. However, he had been worried that it would affect the temperature of the earth fire in his territory, and he hadn't found a place outside that could absorb fire elements. Furthermore, he knew that if they really fought, he wouldn't be a match for Meng Yan. Meng Yan could casually pick up a fire-resistant rock from the ground and smash him to death. The difference in their cultivation levels was too great. Furthermore, there was Demon King Aoli, who was like a brother to him. The reason why Yu Ji had come out to smooth things over was because he had addressed Bai Shouji as Senior Bai. He didn't know if there were any other reasons. Since there was a way out, Yu Qianqiu didn't need to put on an act. The temperature of the surrounding fire dropped rapidly, and it entered his body along with the demonic red flames. The remaining warmth in the hall was blown in by a few cold winds, and it quickly returned to its original coldness. However, there wasn't a single intact metal utensil in the hall. All of them had melted to the ground. Yu Qianqiu's actions undoubtedly showed that he believed Yu Ji's words. However, he still harumphed and said, "It's fine if I'm angry. If I anger someone else, I'm afraid you won't even have the chance to regret it." The few of them, who were already feeling uneasy, immediately felt that something was amiss when they heard this. They secretly exchanged glances. Meng Yan was quite adaptable as he chuckled and said, "Sir, are you really angry? We've known each other for a while. There's no need for us to fall out because of a joke, right?" "Of course not." Yu Qianqiu knew what was going on, but he still smiled. After all, it wouldn't be good for him to fall out. He still needed Meng Yan's help for some things. Furthermore, now wasn't the time to fall out. Seeing that the fire in the hall had been extinguished, Bai Shouji and the others stood guard behind Yu Qianqiu, on guard against Ghost General and the others. Yu Ji walked down the stairs with light steps and walked to Yu Qianqiu. She glanced at Bai Shouji and asked with a smile, "Sir, why didn't you introduce the friend you brought to me and the general?" Yu Qianqiu gave her a meaningful smile and did not say much. He turned to the four men and introduced, "This is General Meng Yan's wife, Lady Yu Ji. I hope you don't mind what happened just now. It's boring here without seeing the sun." It was just a joke that General Meng used to kill his boredom. "It's not the first time I've experienced it." He then introduced to Yu Ji, "These four seniors are the heads of the Bai, Tan, Jing and Wu clans in the cultivation world. I've brought the four seniors here to pay a visit to the general. We have something to ask of you." Although Bai Shouji and the others felt that something was not right, they still bowed in unison since Yu Qianqiu had already said it. "Greetings, General and Madam." Yu Ji bowed to the four gracefully. Meng Yan, who was sitting in front of the throne, waved his hand and said, "We're friends if we know each other. There's no need for formalities." The couple pretended not to understand Yu Qianqiu's sarcasm. "May I know what Mr. needs this general's help with this time?" Meng Yan asked. He acted as if nothing had happened. Fortunately, the broken utensils could still serve as evidence. "Damn it. You're really a bunch of old foxes. Let's see if you can still be so calm after hearing what I have to say." Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "The five of us want to go to the center of the demon region. I'm afraid that the journey will be difficult and dangerous, so I want to borrow some people from you to ensure our safety." Meng Yan, Yu Ji and Aoli were stunned. After a long time, Meng Yan came to his senses and said, "I'm afraid I can't help you with this matter. Of course, it's not that I don't want to help you. It's just that it's tens of thousands of miles from here to the center. There are no less than 10 territories of the Demon King and the Ghost King. If I send my people to protect you, I'm afraid it will cause more trouble. By the way, why do you want to go to the center? Can you tell me?" "Of course, it's not a shameful secret. There's no harm in telling you." Yu Qianqiu pointed at Bai Shouji and the others and said with a smile, "Unfortunately, Senior Bai's ancestor lives in the center of the demon region. This time he came to pay his respects to his ancestor. There's nothing else." As soon as these words came out, Meng Yan and the others could no longer remain calm. Their faces all changed and their expressions kept twitching. Meng Yan looked at Yu Qianqiu with a pitiful expression. The fear and grievance in his eyes were hard to conceal. It was as if he was saying, "Brother, are you trying to trick me? Don't tell me that you don't know who lives in the center of the demon region with the surname Bai." Since you already knew, why didn't you tell me earlier? Why did you have to wait for me to make a move before telling me? Yu Qianqiu looked at him and also expressed a lot of words. Brother, it's not that I don't want to tell you. As soon as we arrived, you wanted to make a move on him and make him kneel. I couldn't even stop you. Fortunately, you stopped in time. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. On the side, Ao Li's expression was even more interesting. He looked as if he wanted to slap himself. He was having a good time and had nothing better to do. Why did he come here? Wasn't he looking for trouble? Meng Yin swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He looked at Bai Shouji and said politely, Mr. Bai, may I know the name of your ancestor? Damn it. He was truly a tortoise who had hardened his heart and was still hoping for a fluke. Yu Qianqiu looked back and saw that Bai Shouji was looking at him. Obviously, he was asking for his opinion, so he nodded with a smile and said, Senior, why don't you show the portrait passed down by your ancestor to General Meng? Maybe they know your ancestor and are willing to help us. Bai Shouji nodded and took out an ancient painting from his storage bag. He carefully unfolded it in front of Meng Yan and the others and said with a solemn expression, My ancestor's name is Changchun. Just hearing this name caused the three demonic ghosts to tremble. They carefully looked at the painting and saw an elegant old man in a plain robe. He stood on a cliff with his hands behind his back, slightly tilting his head to look at the stars in the sky. The old man's otherworldly aura was vividly displayed on the paper. The Demon King and the Ghost King were raised by Changchun. Naturally, they had seen Bai Changchun before. Who else could it be but Bai Changchun in the painting? The three of them were shocked. Meng Yin took a few steps from the throne. Yuji didn't dare to act like a girl anymore. Together with Ao Li, the three of them knelt down in front of the painting in Bai Shouji's hand. Then they kowtowed 3 times and said in a trembling voice, I didn't know Immortal Master's Dharma idol was coming. Please forgive us for not going out to welcome you. The three of them didn't even dare to raise their heads. They still knelt there obediently, waiting to be dealt with. Yu Qianqiu was really shocked. Wow, this Bai Changchun was too awesome. A painting could scare the three of them like this. It could be seen what kind of existence Bai Changchun was in the demon ghost region. It was 2F** King incredible, 2F* King awesome. Bai Changchun's painting had such great power. This was an expression that Yu Qianqiu had never dreamed of. He stood there with his mouth wide open. Chapter 266. Bai Shouji and the other three were first shocked by the actions of Meng Yan and the others, then they were shocked. They were not stupid, so they naturally knew what it meant for the three of them to kneel down. The four of them looked at each other blankly, stunned. Their first reaction was that Yu Qianqiu really did not lie to them. Their ancestor Bai Changchun was really still alive. There was no doubt that their ancestor's cultivation had indeed reached the legendary soul formation stage. For a moment, the four of them actually felt like crying, and their eyes were all misty with tears. As the masters of the 4 major families, the 4 of them had risked their lives to personally come to this extremely dangerous monster domain. The determination they had made was unimaginable to outsiders. The 4 major families were originally one, and they depended on each other. The reason why they could have their current status was that the 4 families had always adhered to the ancestral teaching of supporting each other. However, where there was interest, there would be conflict. Now that more than 2,000 years had passed, the families were far from being as peaceful as they seemed on the surface. The voices within them were getting louder and louder. To put it bluntly, it was because the power of the 4 families had always been in the hands of the current bloodline, and this bloodline was the absolute backbone of adhering to the ancestral teaching. They had always adhered to the ancestral teaching of supporting each other. Because of this mutual support, when one family was in chaos, the other 3 families would work together to suppress it. As a result, it was difficult for the disciples of the other bloodlines of the 4 families to get involved in power. Therefore, the ambitious people within the families were naturally very uncomfortable with the main teaching of supporting each other. They tried their best to abandon this ancestral teaching, and the matter had become more and more serious. Originally they could have used ruthless means to suppress them, but they were not other sects but the families. The consequences of using ruthless means against the clansmen of the same origin were very serious. There was too much internal friction, and the four major families were in danger of being swallowed by others at any time. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu suddenly brought the news that Bai Changchun was still alive. This was really great news for Bai Shouji and the others. Bai Changchun's prestige within the four major families was needless to say. If they could invite Bai Changchun back, all the difficulties would be easily solved. Therefore this trip to the monster domain was made. Although Bai Shouji and the others knew how powerful their ancestor was, they did not expect him to be so powerful in the monster domain. Looking at the Monster King and the Ghost King kneeling in front of their ancestor's portrait, the four of them had a new understanding of their ancestor's power. Although they were excited, they were also a little at a loss. Yu Qianqiu was stunned by this scene for a long time, but he was the first to recover. Look, he couldn't let them keep kneeling, right? The problem was still the portrait. Bai Changchun's face was too big. He could not help but feel. Yu Qianqiu coughed twice and pulled on Bai Shouji's clothes. He said softly, "That's enough. Senior, shouldn't you put the painting away?" Bai Shouji was suddenly enlightened. He quickly and carefully rolled up the painting scroll and put it back into the storage bag. He now understood that the ancestor's painting was a treasure. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said to the three people kneeling on the ground, "General, the paintings have been collected, you may rise." Hearing this, the three of them raised their heads and slowly stood up. They bowed deeply to Bai Shouji. Bai Shouji repeatedly bowed back. In the beginning, the ghost general was not an exaggeration. Now he was treating them with respect. The difference was so big that the latter could not get used to it. Meng Yan's domineering face was gone. He cupped his hands and said, "Mr. Bai, please tell me if you need anything. I will do my best." Holy *T. Meh. So disgusting. The corners of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. Seeing Bai Shouji looking at him, it was obvious that the other party had not gotten used to it. He still had to be the spokesperson for the time being. Yu Qianqiu coughed lightly and said with a smile, "General Meng, Senior Bai is going to the center of the demon domain to pay his respects to the ancestor. I think there shouldn't be any trouble with General Meng and Brother Ao here." Meng Yan looked at Yu Qianqiu with an indescribable expression. He smiled bitterly and said, "It's impossible with just the two of us, but..." He cupped his hands and said loudly, "Now that we have the portrait of the immortal master, let alone the center, there is no place in the demon domain that we can't go. Who dares to stop us?" His words made Bai Shouji and the other three's blood boil. They were even more eager to see the ancestor. Yu Qianqiu smiled at him and said, "Senior Bai, I forgot to tell you that your ancestor is the master of this endless demon domain." "What?" the four of them exclaimed. They were so shocked that they could not say a word. They originally thought that the ancestor only used his profound cultivation of the soul formation stage to make the demons and ghosts fear him. They did not expect that he was the master of the demon domain. The person who could be the master of this dangerous place which was passed down for generations, was actually their ancestor? The four of them trembled with excitement. Meng Yan looked at Yu Qianqiu with deep suspicion. This guy brought the ancestor here, but he did not explain it clearly to the ancestor? Yu Qianqiu was embarrassed by his stare. With a serious expression, he quickly changed the topic and said, "Since there is no problem, I will trouble General and Brother Ao to send some experts to see us off. The sooner we go, the sooner we can solve the problem. Senior Bai, don't you think so?" Bai Shouji cupped his hands and said to Meng Yan, "If it is convenient, I naturally hope to see the ancestor as soon as possible." "I dare not. It is my duty to serve you." Meng Yan quickly returned the greeting and glanced at Yu Qianqiu. The latter turned his head to the side and pretended not to see. Since the matter had been decided, Meng Yan and Ao Li did not dare to delay. They immediately went to make arrangements and left Yu Ji, the hostess, to wait for the others. All kinds of wine and food were continuously sent over by the servants. The few of them ate and drank while waiting for the return of the Ghost King and the Demon King. During the feast, Yu Ji dismissed the servants and personally poured wine for them. Her respectful attitude made the others feel a little embarrassed. After all, she was the famous wife of the Ghost General. Yu Qianqiu looked at her strangely. This woman was not simple. She was someone who could make decisions for the Ghost General, Meng Yan. Why was she so obedient now? She almost did not say anything and her behavior was appropriate. Was she frightened by Bai Changchun? "Madam, I have a question," Yu Qianqiu suddenly said. Yuji smiled and nodded. Sir, please ask. Yuji will tell you everything she knows. Then I will thank you in advance. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and said, Madam, have you heard of the resurrection grass in the demon ghost region? Bai Shouji and the other three raised their heads in surprise. Obviously they had heard of this thing too. I have heard of it, but I have never seen it. Yuji smiled and said, Legend has it that it grows in the Jiuyuming cave under the Chilly Wind Valley, but no one has ever picked it because no one can enter the Jiuyuming cave. The so-called Jiuyuming cave was indeed the Jiuyuming cave. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, Is the Chilly Wind Valley really so powerful? Can't General Meng go in with his ability? Chapter 267. Although my general has reached the last stage of the Ghost King, he can only practice in the 8th underworld cave. It's impossible for him to enter the 9th underworld cave. Even if he becomes a ghost sage, he can only do it lightly. If he wants to enter the bottom of the cave, he must be at the last stage of the ghost sage. Yuji said with a smile. Yu Qianqiu nodded. He had heard of this before. Yuji's answer only made him more sure. He frowned and said, Madam, do you mean that even if a human reaches the soul formation stage, he can't enter the bottom without reaching the last stage of the soul formation stage? You may not know this, but the 9th underworld cave is the only passage open for ghost cultivators to enter the underworld. It's not for the so-called masters among ordinary cultivators. When Yuji said this, she left the banquet with light steps. A trace of bitterness flashed across her face. She sighed faintly and said, In life, fortune and misfortune are uncertain. Some people encounter disasters or disasters. Among these people who die abnormally, there are often people with deep resentment. They don't want to erase the memory of this life and reincarnate, so it's difficult for them to enter the reincarnation. So they stay in the human world and turn to ghost cultivation, hoping to achieve success in cultivation and fulfill their last wish. Alas, my general is one of them. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, It seems that there are many people who share the same ideals as General Meng. For example, Madam and the hundreds of thousands of soldiers under the general's command. They still follow the general after death. It's really commendable. When people die, everything is empty. How many people can talk endlessly after death? If it weren't for the general's high prestige in the army, how many of those soldiers who died in the war would continue to follow the general after death? I'm afraid they would have already reincarnated. Yuji shook her head and smiled bitterly. Yu Qianqiu heard a little helplessness in her tone. He was slightly stunned and said, Isn't it good to continue to be a ghost cultivator after death? I heard that ghost cultivators are immortal unless they encounter an external disaster. Then do you know what will happen to ghost cultivators if they encounter an external disaster? After Yuji asked a rhetorical question, she replied with a smile. After a ghost cultivator encounters an external calamity, his soul will scatter and his spirit will be destroyed, and he will never be able to reincarnate. The few of them looked at each other in dismay. Yu Qianqiu exclaimed, How could this be? Mister, you're not part of it, so you don't know the reason. Yuji smiled bitterly and said, Although ghost cultivators have an unlimited lifespan, the time it takes to achieve enlightenment is far beyond that of demons and humans. When humans and demons cultivate to the extreme, as long as they can withstand the test of heavenly tribulation, they can ascend to the immortal world. Even if he was killed by an external calamity, he could just reincarnate and become a new person. Ghost cultivators are different. Not entering the netherworld after death is already a heaven-defying action. After painstakingly cultivating to the extreme, they must enter the 9 nether cave and return to the netherworld. Only then will they have the chance to cultivate to fruition. The few of them had never heard of such a thing. It was simply unbelievable. Yu Qianqiu swallowed his saliva and asked, You mean even if ghost cultivators reach the late stage of ghost saint, they still have to return to the netherworld through the 9 nether cave to cultivate? Why are you so long-winded? What's so good about cultivating to fruition? Since they have the cultivation of the late stage of ghost saint and have an unlimited lifespan, Why not stay in the human world and enjoy life? Yuji looked at Baishoji and said, Immortal Master Bai often said, if heaven has feelings, this sentence is the truth. After that, she turned her gaze to Yu Qianshou and said, both humans and demons have a limited lifespan. If they don't achieve the great Tao, they will enter reincarnation. Although the lifespan of demons is much longer than that of humans, they will suffer more tribulations than humans to cultivate to fruition. If they are not careful, they will enter reincarnation. Do you really think that heaven can leave a cultivator with unlimited lifespan in the human world? The so-called unlimited lifespan of ghost cultivators refers to having unlimited time to cultivate to fruition. It doesn't mean that they can live forever in the human world. Once ghost cultivators have the cultivation of the late stage of ghost saint, if they don't return to the netherworld through the 9 nether cave in time, they will immediately attract an irresistible tribulation that will directly destroy their souls, and they won't even have the chance to reincarnate. Damn! Yu Qianshou screamed, then there's no room for discussion. We can only go back obediently. Everything is heaven's will. It's not easy to return to the netherworld. This may be the retribution of having an unlimited lifespan for ghost cultivators. Yuji smiled bitterly and said, even if a ghost cultivator at the late stage of ghost saint can safely reach the bottom of the 9 nether cave, he still has to open the 9 nether gate between the human world and the netherworld. Behind the gate is the way back to the netherworld, but the way back is not smooth. On the way, he will receive the baptism of the netherworld and get rid of the human spirit. If he is lucky, he can keep most of his cultivation and cultivate in the netherworld again. If he is unlucky, he will return to the reincarnation of a mortal ghost, and all his previous efforts will be wasted. Everyone sighed. They didn't expect that it was so difficult to be a ghost cultivator. Yu Qianshou said quietly, then don't step into the late stage of ghost saint and continue to stay in the human world. Yuji bit her red lips and said resolutely, Yuji yearns for the prosperity of the human world. But if Yuji wants to be trapped in this demon domain forever, Yuji would rather cultivate to the late stage of ghost saint and open the 9 nether gate. At worst, she will reincarnate and be a human again. Baishoji and others were confused. They didn't understand why they had to be trapped in the demon domain. However, Yu Qianshou understood. With a terrifying guy like Bai Changchun in the demon domain, who was not afraid of death, would try to walk out of the demon domain. No wonder Yuji wanted him to help her leave the demon domain. It turned out that this was the reason. Why does a madam leave the demon domain? Baishoji finally couldn't help but ask the reason. As soon as she said this, Yu Qianshou felt that something was wrong. This woman was very cunning. She wouldn't say a lot of things for no reason. Sure enough, a beautiful woman like Yuji immediately knelt down in front of Baishoji. Baishoji didn't know what to do. He asked her to get up again and again, but he couldn't even help her up. She was completely acting like a woman. Baishoji looked at Yu Qianshou for help. Yu Qianshou's teeth twitched and he said, Senior, why don't you listen to what Madam has to say first? After that, he looked outside and thought, damn it. Sure enough, they are a group of old foxes. I was wondering why they left a woman to greet a group of men. It is obviously not in line with the etiquette of this era. It turns out that they left this social flower to do public relations. Damn it. Before this matter was settled, General Meng wouldn't come back. Baishoji was helpless. He could only shake his head and said, Madam, if you have something to say, say it quickly. I really can't accept such a big gift. Yuji nodded and said, Mr. just asked me why I don't leave the demon domain. I really have some difficulties. Mister, do you know why the demon ghosts in the demon domain don't leave the demon domain? I don't know. Baishoji shook his head and said, Madam, if you have something to say, say it quickly. Otherwise, when General Meng comes back, I really won't have the face to face him. Yu Qianshou sneered and thought, if you don't agree, her husband won't come back. Sorry to disturb you, mister. It's all my fault. But after you listen to me, I'm sure you will understand my difficulties. Yuji knelt and saluted. She said, it's not that the demon ghosts in the demon domain, including me, can't leave, but they don't dare to. Because anyone who leaves the demon domain without permission will be executed by the torture envoy. No one has ever escaped the punishment of the torture envoy. Torture envoy? Baishoji exchanged glances with the others and vaguely guessed something. It was also the first time that Yu Qianshou had heard of this term, but he had already guessed who it was. Yuji explained, the torture envoy has existed since ancient times. It means the envoy who carries out punishment on behalf of the heaven. His cultivation is unfathomable, and he controls the life and death of the entire demon domain. If any demon ghost breaks out of the demon domain without his permission, he will definitely kill them. And this torture envoy is none other than Mr.'s ancestor, immortal Master Bai. Shoji and the others looked at each other. They didn't expect that their ancestor would abandon his family and get such a position in the demon domain. But they also understood what Yuji meant. She probably wanted him to beg the ancestor to let her out of the demon domain. But what was the use of agreeing to her? He didn't even know if the ancestor would recognize him. Seeing his hesitation, Yuji knew that he understood what she meant. She said anxiously, "The reason why the torture envoy doesn't let the demon ghosts out is because he is afraid that they will disturb the human world. That's why he will punish them heavily. But I can guarantee that after I leave with the general and Aoli, we will live our lives obediently. We won't dare to do anything that goes against the torture envoy's wishes. Otherwise we will be punished by the torture envoy and die without complaint. Please, mister, for the sake of my sincerity, plead with the ancestor to let the three of us out of the demon domain. Please, mister." After saying that, she kowtowed repeatedly. Chapter 268. This time, Shoji was really in a difficult position. It was not that he did not want to agree, but he did not know what the ancestor's attitude towards him was. However, Yuji kept kowtowing, looking as if she would not stop until he agreed. There was no other way. Shoji gritted his teeth and said, "I agree. Madam, please get up." Releasing three at once? Yuchencho raised his eyebrows but did not say anything. It was none of his business anyway. Yuji kowtowed 3 times in a row and stood up with a face full of surprise. "Thank you, mister." "Thank you, mister." "Madam, don't thank me yet. To be honest, although I promised madam, I do not have the confidence to make the ancestor agree. I can only try. As for whether I will succeed or not, I cannot guarantee," Shoji said helplessly. I understand. As long as Mr. is willing to say it, regardless of whether it succeeds or not, I, the general, and Aoli will be forever grateful," Yuji said indifferently. Since it was like this, Shoji had nothing else to say. He looked at Yuchencho with Wuxia and the other two. Yuchencho smiled at them. That old thing by Changchun was too scary. Before seeing him and understanding him, it was better not to express his opinion. Usually, this kind of old thing had lived for too long and was even more monstrous than a monster. Who knew what kind of eccentric character he would have? He was not related to him like Shoji and the others, so it was better not to get involved in this matter. He had made up his mind to listen and watch more and try not to say anything to avoid getting into trouble. Yuchencho raised his wine cup to the fore and smiled. Drink. Yes, please drink to your heart's content. I will pour the wine." Yuji, who was in a good mood, smiled like a peach and urged them to drink. After a while, Mengyan and Aoli came together and bowed to Shoji. "Mister, everything is ready. We can set off at any time." "General, let me tell you a piece of great news." Yuji raised her wine glass and brought it over. She told the 2 kings what Shoji had promised her. Mengyan and Aoli glanced at each other, their faces filled with indescribable joy. Then the 2 kings bowed to Shoji. Mengyan was pleasantly surprised. "Regardless of whether this matter succeeds or not, the 3 of us will never forget Mister's great kindness." As the 2 sides exchanged pleasantries, Yuchencho drank his wine. In any case, he had a feeling that this matter would not succeed so easily. There might even be danger. "Who cares, I'll just run away first." "Yuchencho, do you think we can move now?" Shoji asked. From what he knew, Yuchencho was more familiar with this place than they were, and he also had a mysterious background. There was no harm in asking for more advice. I'm fine with anything." Yuchencho raised his glass and said, "In any case, I'm just here to join in the fun. Don't leave me behind." Wuxia, who knew him better, frowned. From what he knew, this brat would cause trouble wherever he went. When had he ever been so obedient? Shoji turned to Mengyan and asked, "General, why don't we set off now?" "All right." Mengyan clapped his hands and smiled. "As you wish, mister. Let's go now." Everyone stood up, and Yuchencho seized the time to drink 2 more cups of wine. He also swept a few jars of unopened wine to the side into his storage bag. He was prepared to let Guan Yu and the others have a taste of the ghost brewed wine. Then he followed the others out of the Ghost King's hall. Mengyan brought 4 Ghost Kings while Aoli brought 4 of his sedan bearers. The 2 kings would personally escort them to the center of the monster ghost region. Yuji did not follow. Considering the difference in cultivation between Yuchencho and the others, he would definitely not be able to keep up with the others. In order to take care of him, the group of 15 finally sat on Jing Feihong's flying instrument. After that, the flying shuttle flew quickly toward the center of the monster ghost region. Ghost General Meng Yan and Demon King Ao Li stood side by side at the head of the flying shuttle. With the two of them standing in front, all the demons and ghosts along the way retreated. No one dared to cause trouble. Everyone was excited to see Bai Changchun. Only Yu Qianqiu sat quietly in the corner at the back, sleeping. Wu Sihai looked back at him from time to time. After sleeping for a long time, Yu Qianqiu was suddenly awakened by the sound of fighting. He got up and asked for the reason. It turned out that they had already reached the territory of the other demon kings and the ghost king. The monster ghosts here would not give face to Meng Yan and Ao Li. However, the people brought by the two kings were all experts. Ordinary people could not stop them. Without the two kings taking action, the 4 ghosts and 4 demons could easily deal with them. Yu Qianqiu saw that the sky in the monster ghost region was already turning bright. He estimated that it was already daytime outside. Then he looked at Meng Yan and the 4 ghost generals. They were not affected at all. He could not help but be amazed. Normally, ghost cultivators could not appear in the daytime. How could these 5 guys be fine? However, he did not know that in the monster ghost region, because it was shrouded in gloomy clouds and fog for a long time, the sun could not shine directly. Ghost cultivators with the cultivation of the ghost king could walk normally. As for those with cultivation lower than the ghost king, they would not be so lucky. In addition, in the case of direct sunlight, even the ghost sage could not do it. This was the power of the law of heaven and earth. Under the law, everything obeyed. After a good sleep, he could not sleep even if he wanted to, so he leaned on the side of the boat and enjoyed the scenery of the monster ghost region. Along the way, the noise became louder and louder. Meng Yan and Ao Li were confident and not afraid at all. Finally, they attracted the Demon King and the Ghost King who were in charge of this place. Perhaps Meng Yan and Bai Shouji had discussed it. When the Demon King and the Ghost King arrived, Bai Shouji's Bai Changchun scroll was unfolded. Coupled with Meng Yan's explanation of the situation, the Demon King and the Ghost King did not dare to block their way. Not only did they not dare to block their way, but they also personally sent the shuttle out of their own territory. It was like this along the way. Yu Qianqiu watched coldly from the side and did not say anything. He slept at night and enjoyed the scenery during the day. Anyway, he did not need to fight. When he woke up on the 3rd night, Meng Yan suddenly summoned everyone and said excitedly, "In front of us is a flat lake that covers 1,000 miles. In the center of the lake is an island called Obedient Island. Celestial Master lives on this island." Hearing this, everyone became excited, but they were more anxious. Yu Qianqiu was the same. He craned his neck to look. About an hour later, a large patch of blue sky appeared in the distant gloomy sky. It was bright and abundant sunlight shone down from the sky, forming a golden pillar of light. After another half an hour, everyone saw a large mirror under the sun. It should be the 1,000 miles of flat lake that Meng Yan had mentioned. Looking from afar, everyone discovered a strange thing. The sky above the lake was not shrouded in gloomy clouds and mist like the sky in other places of the demon ghost territory. There was not even a cloud or mist. The blue sky was symmetrical to the azure lake, and they seemed to be of the same size. The lake was sparkling, which was particularly special in the demon ghost territory. Not long after, the shuttle stopped not far from the lake. Meng Yan turned around and apologized to everyone. "I am a ghost cultivator and do not dare to be exposed to the sun. I can only send you here." He pointed to the lake in the distance and said to Bai Shouji, "Fly straight to the center of the lake and you will see an island. On the island is the residence of your ancestor. We will leave our matter to you, mister." "Thank you, General and King Ao." Bai Shouji cupped his hands and said, "I will do my best to do what I promised." Meng Yan and Ao Li looked at each other and couldn't hide the joy on their faces. They cupped their fists and said, "We will wait here for Mister's good news." The two kings jumped off the shuttle with their subordinates and waved at the lakeside to send them off. The shuttle turned into a stream of light and flew away. After a while, a black dot appeared in the line of sight of everyone on the shuttle. Gradually, the island and the lake became clearer. After arriving above the island, the 5 people looked at the overall appearance of the island anxiously. It was not a big island. It was estimated to be about 1 kilometer in circumference. There were steep stone walls on all sides that plunged into the water. The stone walls were covered with vines that hung all the way to the water. The whole island was like a pier. The island was covered in lush greenery, and there were a few ancient buildings scattered in the center. However, there was nothing special about them. The only special thing was that the entire island was shrouded in a thin layer of mist. It was almost invisible under the sun. The few of them looked at each other anxiously. Was this the place where the famous Punisher lived? Since you are here, come down. Just when everyone was hesitating whether they should go down directly, they suddenly heard an old voice. They could not tell where the voice came from, but they knew it was from the island. This time, the few of them did not dare to hesitate anymore. They immediately landed and put away the shuttle, but they did not know where to go. At this time, a young man suddenly came out of the forest. The young man was thin, tall, and handsome. He rolled up his sleeves and pants and carried a hoe on his shoulder. He was dressed like a farmer. Under everyone's shocked gaze, the young man walked over and said, "Come with me." His words were simple, but the few of them could not refuse, so they followed behind him obediently. The young man carrying the hoe led them to a few simple and elegant buildings. He found a place to put the hoe in his hand and led them into the hall of the largest house. He said, "Wait a moment, master will be here soon." After saying that, he went out. The few of them looked at each other. Could this person be Bai Changchun's disciple? Looking at the furnishings in the house, it could not be any simpler. The floor was covered with straw mats, but there was not even a chair to sit on, let alone a table. In short, it was empty. Just when the few of them were in a daze, an old man dressed like a farmer came in. The old man had a thin face, black hair, and a beard. He was in high spirits and looked younger than Bai Shoji and the others. The few of them could tell at a glance that this person looked exactly like Bai Changchun in the portrait. However, the aloof and arrogant expression in the portrait had been replaced by a calm and peaceful expression. He gave off the feeling of a kind grandfather. The four of them, who were in a daze, immediately knelt down and kowtowed, saying, "Greetings, ancestor." Yu Qianqiu felt that it was a bit dangerous to stand alone, or a bit inappropriate, so he quickly knelt down as well. "You are the current clan masters of the Bai, Tan, Jing, and Wu clans?" The old man looked at the five of them and asked. No one knew where he got this information from. Bai Shoji, who was kneeling, straightened his upper body and said excitedly, "Ancestor is wise. The descendant of the Bai clan, Bai Shoji, greets ancestor." After saying that, he kowtowed again. "The descendant of the Tan clan, Tan Ruchang, the descendant of the Jing clan, Jing Feihong, the descendant of the Wu clan, Sun Wu Sihai, greets ancestor." The other three followed and kowtowed again. "The descendant of the Tan clan, Tan Ruchang, the descendant of the Jing clan, Jing Feihong, and the descendant of the Wu clan, Sun Wu Sihai, greets ancestor." The other three followed and kowtowed again. Although his voice was relatively weak, it did not escape Bai Changchun's ears. Bai Changchun was slightly stunned. He frowned and muttered, "The descendant of the Yu clan, Yu Qianqiu, greets ancestor." Although his voice was relatively weak, it did not escape Bai Changchun's ears. Bai Changchun was slightly stunned. He frowned and muttered, "The Yu clan? Which clan is the Yu clan from?" Hearing this, the faces of Bai Shoji and the other three twitched. What was this brat doing? Bai Changchun thought for a while but could not remember. He did not think about it anymore. He raised his hand and said, "Stand up." After the five of them respectfully stood up, he asked again, "Why did you come all the way here to find me?" Bai Shoji immediately and respectfully explained the current predicament the four clans were facing. He respectfully asked the ancestor to return and stabilize the situation. After Bai Changchun listened, he nodded and did not say anything. However, he saw the young man who had just left walk in with 4 swords in his arms. He placed them in front of Bai Changchun and left. Bai Changchun raised his hand and put up an index finger. The air in the central room suddenly fluctuated, and Bai Shoji and the other three immediately felt their bodies being shackled to the point where they could not move at all. As a huge pressure came gushing at them, the 4 of them spat out a mouthful of blood. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He immediately wanted to flash back to Utopia, but he held back in the end. He decided to wait and see first. The blood that the 4 of them had spat out formed a ball and floated toward Bai Changchun. It stood up neatly on his raised index finger and gradually formed 4 big words: Bai, Tan, Jing, and Wu. Bai Changchun waved his finger expressionlessly, and the 4 bloody words landed on the point where the handles and blades of the 4 swords connected. He then quickly performed a series of hand signs on each of the 4 bloody words before raising his palm to send out 4 beams of light toward the 4 swords. After a series of spells were cast, the central room returned to peace. Bai Shoji and the other 3 looked a little pale as they looked at the patriarch in shock and bewilderment. Yu Qianqiu had seen everything clearly from the beginning to the end. He was staring at the four swords with bright eyes and he was extremely excited. Since they came from the old man, they must be treasures. They must be good treasures. Bai Changchun raised his hand and waved, and the four swords floated in front of the four of them. After the four of them grabbed the swords in front of them hesitantly, he said slowly, "These four swords were casually made by a good friend of mine when he was playing here. Although they are not good treasures, it is not an exaggeration to say that they are inferior grade spiritual treasures. They should be enough for you. I've planted a blood curse on all four swords. Those who are not your direct blood relatives will not be able to unleash their power." These four swords are spiritual treasures? They are actually the legendary spiritual treasures? The four of them were shocked as they looked at the swords in their hands in disbelief. How many years had it been since a spiritual treasure appeared in the cultivation world? The four of them immediately knelt down and said excitedly, "Thank you, Patriarch, for bestowing the swords." Yu Qianqiu looked greedily at the treasures that the four of them held tightly in their hands. It was a pity that they were planted with some bullsh *T blood curse. Even if he could get his hands on them, he could not use them. After you take these four swords back, you must use them carefully and abide by your duties. Do not be ostentatious and do not use them casually unless it is a critical moment. Otherwise you will definitely attract trouble. Bai Changchun warned. "We will follow the teachings of the Patriarch." The four of them kowtowed again excitedly. Sigh. Bai Changchun looked at the four of them and suddenly sighed. "There is no eternal family clan in this world. This is the only thing I can do. You know yourselves well. Alright, go back. No matter what happens in the future, do not look for me again. Otherwise I will not let you off easily." Patriarch. The four of them exclaimed in disbelief. Bai Changchun frowned, waved his hand and shouted, "Go. Don't make me say any more." The four of them hesitated for a while. They had just arrived and they had to leave? They were a little unwilling. After being shouted at by Changchun again, they finally understood that the situation could not be reversed. With tears streaming down their faces, they kowtowed and said, "Farewell, Patriarch. Take care, Patriarch." After saying that, they stood up and slowly retreated out of the hall. Yu Qianqiu followed behind the four of them. He muttered in his heart, "Damn it. You four old things should not know what's good for you. Every time you come, you get a numinous treasure. If anything happens in the future, I will be unlucky. I have already called Patriarch, knelt and kowtowed. In the end, I had to accompany you all for nothing. I did not even get any reward. So, who asked me to not have a good ancestor?" Just as the few of them reached the door, Bai Shoji suddenly remembered what he had promised Meng Yan. He immediately turned around and took a few steps forward. He knelt and kowtowed to Bai Changchun. "Patriarch, I still have something to report to Patriarch." The few people at the door also stopped and turned around to look at him. Bai Changchun frowned and said, "What else do you have to say? Say it quickly and go back immediately." Bai Shoji was an old man, but he knelt there with a childlike expression. He said embarrassedly, "It was all thanks to the help of the ghost general Meng Yan and his wife and the demon king Aoli that I was able to see Patriarch safely. Before coming here, I promised the three of them to ask Patriarch for a favor. The three of them asked you to beg me to let them leave the ghost region?" Bai Changchun interrupted coldly. "Yes." Bai Shoji lowered his head in a low voice. Bai Changchun said expressionlessly, "Meng Yan and Aoli left their posts without permission. I have already executed them. You don't have to worry about them. You can leave now." Oh. The few of them could not help but scream. Meng Yan and Aoli were actually dead. How long had it been? They could still remember the scene of the two of them waving goodbye by the lake. Yu Qianqiu shivered all over. The old man looked kind, but he was a cruel and merciless person. Bai Shoji did not dare to say anything more. He obediently retreated. Just as they walked out of the door, they suddenly heard Bai Changchun say, "You can't go. Stay." Chapter 269. They turned around at the same time, but Yu Qianzhou's heart was pounding. He pretended that he did not hear anything and continued to walk forward. After a few steps out of the house, Bai Changchun's voice came again. If you dare to walk again, I'll remove both your legs. Yu Qianzhou shuddered and immediately stopped. He turned around and smiled awkwardly. Is the great ancestor calling me? Bai Changchun ignored him and said to Bai Shouji and the other three in a deep voice, You guys go, he stays. The four of them looked at Yu Qianzhou. They did not know why the great ancestor wanted him to stay. Although they were hesitant, they did not dare to dawdle and quickly left. When they passed by Yu Qianzhou, they shook their heads apologetically. They could only blame the great ancestor for being too powerful. No matter how good their relationship with Yu Qianzhou was, they did not dare to speak up for him. Wu Sihai even gave him an expression that said, Good luck. The flying shuttle carried the four of them into the sky and quickly left. Below, Yu Qianzhou's eyes were reluctant to leave. He only turned around when the flying shuttle could no longer be seen in the sky. Bai Changchun's eyes wandered around his body and said with slight doubt, That's strange. I can't see through your cultivation base. What's the reason? Ever since Junior reached the Qi training stage, no one has been able to see through Junior's cultivation base. It should be natural. After Yu Qianzhou said that, he was suddenly stunned. He said in shock, Senior, don't tell me that you want me to stay because you can't see through Junior's cultivation base? Natural. There's such a physique? I've never heard of it. Bai Changchun frowned and did not answer the latter question. Yu Qianzhou, who was standing opposite, immediately felt a divine sense that felt like it was solid, checking his body inside and out. It was as if there was a pair of hands touching his body. It made him uncomfortable, but he did not dare to resist. After the inspection, Bai Changchun shook his head and said, I thought there was some kind of smokescreen that could fool this old man, but it seems like it's really natural. After saying that, he waved his hand at Yu Qianzhou and said, There's nothing else, you can leave too. Ugh. Yu Qianzhou's face twitched. In his heart, he cursed Bai Changchun's 18 generations of ancestors. Just because of this he made me stay, and now he's telling me to get lost. Isn't he too arrogant? You should at least give me some mental comfort. Unfortunately, the other party was too powerful, so he didn't dare to voice his anger. Yu Qianzhou gritted his teeth and bowed, Senior, please understand. With my cultivation, it's really difficult for me to leave the demon domain alone. I wonder if Senior can? What does your cultivation have to do with me? Bai Changchun's peaceful appearance hit a cold heart. He glanced at Yu Qianzhou and said coldly, I didn't invite you here. How to leave the demon domain is your own business. If you continue to be long-winded, you can stay here forever. After saying that, he turned around and went inside. Yu Qianzhou wanted to say something but stopped. Previously he wanted to ask if Xiaoqian had any spiritual treasures or something like that. If he did, he could give Xiaoqian one to protect himself so that he could leave the demon domain safely. However, Xiaoqian didn't even give him a chance to finish speaking. Instead he threw down a threat which made Yu Qianzhou choke. Old bastard. Yu Qianzhou could only curse in his heart. He unsheathed the sword on his back and carried him into the air. Floating in the air, Yu Qianzhou glanced down resentfully. He thought to himself, Old bastard, if you have the guts, don't die too early. Wait for me to come back and pay me back. With a flick of his sleeve, he was about to soar into the sky. However, before he could fly far, he suddenly felt that his body couldn't move at all. Then, a powerful suction force that he couldn't resist fiercely pulled him back. Damn. Yu Qianzhou let out a strange cry. Before he could react, he was pulled back to the ground like a kite on a string. When he reacted and wanted to flash back to Utopia, there was a loud bang, and his body slammed into the ground. He immediately felt dizzy and saw stars, and his mind lost all thoughts. He lay on the ground for a long time before he regained consciousness. All the bones in his body felt like they were broken, and he was in great pain. There was a hot liquid in his mouth and nose, making it impossible for him to breathe. He closed his eyes and held his breath, forcefully spitting out the liquid in his nose. After he could breathe again, he felt much better. He raised his hand with great difficulty to wipe the liquid flowing down his cheek. When he saw it, the back of his hand was bright red. I'm injured? Yu Qianzhou's pupils immediately dilated. He endured the pain all over his body and clenched his teeth as he got up unsteadily. He gritted his teeth and looked for his enemy. He saw Bai Changchun looking at him at the door. Needless to say, he was the one who did it. Yu Qianzhou was hot-headed and he immediately scolded, Bai Changchun, you old fart. Did I ever offend you? He stopped abruptly as he realized that the guy in front of him was a super powerful person who could take his life at any time. He did not dare to say anything and immediately locked his divine sense on Jin Zhu, ready to fight at any moment. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would not disappear in front of Bai Changchun. Once he aroused this old fart's curiosity, he would not be able to show his face in the cultivation world anymore. With the other party's cultivation, it was hard to guarantee that he would not be discovered the moment he showed his face. Perhaps it had been a long time since Bai Changchun was scolded like this, so he was stunned by Yu Qianqiu's scolding. After a slight fluctuation in his expression, he calmed down again and said emotionlessly, "I happen to be lacking a farmer here. You don't have to leave. Just stay here and grow vegetables." "Grow vegetables?" Yu Qianqiu asked shyly, thinking that he had heard wrong. Seeing that Bai Changchun did not answer and went back into the house, his worried heart immediately relaxed. He was speechless for a while. He dragged his injured body and looked around, not knowing where to go. He felt like he had no one to turn to. At this time, the lanky young man dressed as a farmer walked in front of him and stared at Yu Qianqiu curiously. A trace of worship flashed across his face. Then he smiled and nodded. "Are you okay?" "I'm called Healy, come with me." Yu Qianqiu was a little confused. He did not know what was going on. His mind was a mess. Seeing that the other party was friendly, he nodded and said, "I'm okay. I'm called Yu Qianqiu." "I know." The young man called Healy smiled and turned around. He waved his hand and said, "Yu Qianqiu, come with me." Yu Qianqiu called back the flying sword on the ground and hurried a few steps. His chest churned again. He felt a sweetness in his throat. He could not hold it in and spat out a mouthful of blood. Healy walked in front and turned his head to smile. "There won't be too much of a problem. Master knows when to stop. Damn it. If you have the ability, you can try falling from such a high place." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. Before leaving, he did not forget to venting his anger in the direction of Bai Changchun's room. But he did not know that Bai Changchun was frowning and muttering, "Strange. When this kid's chi revolved, why did I feel a burning aura? After looking carefully, I did not find anything." The two of them walked several hundred meters through the verdant forest. They came to a relatively flat but overgrown area. Healy pointed at the barren land with a radius of 100 meters. Healy smiled and said, "After your injury is healed, this land will be yours to cultivate. You can build a residence here. You can cut any wood you need on the island. After the house is built, I will send you the seeds you want to plant." Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, "Plant vegetables?" Healy turned his head and smiled. "Yes, plant vegetables. In the future we can be companions." Yu Qianqiu stared blankly at the wasteland when he heard this. He was slightly unable to wrap his head around it, and he felt like he was dreaming. How did I end up growing vegetables here? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.